Hello there, and welcome to Planet in Question, where curiosity drifts at the speed of a falling snowflake and wonder takes its time to settle. Tonight, I want to invite you into a story that moves slowly, quietly, like the movement of glaciers across continents. A story that isn't about what we've built, but what might have been built long before us. Long before recorded history, long before the world we recognize, there may have been entire civilizations that vanished not into myth or fire or the sea, but beneath the ice. Before we go too far, let's take a moment to find where you are in this moment. Maybe you're tucked into bed, the glow of your screen dimmed to a soft amber, the world around you already half asleep. Maybe you're lying on a couch, headphones in, the hum of distant traffic like the slow breath of the planet. Or maybe you're sitting at a window somewhere cold, watching frost bloom across the glass while the night folds itself around you. However you've arrived here, thank you for being here. Take a breath. Let the air fill your chest, the way it once filled the endless skies over ice-covered lands. What we'll be exploring tonight isn't a story of certainty, it's a drift through possibility, a quiet wondering about what the Earth might still be hiding in its frozen vaults. Because ice, for all its stillness, is not empty. It remembers. It records. It conceals. Beneath the white plains of Antarctica, beneath the glaciers of Greenland, beneath the frozen heart of Siberia, there are landscapes untouched by sunlight for millions of years. Rivers still flow there, trapped in darkness. Mountains rise and valleys sink, preserved like dreams sealed in glass. And maybe, just maybe, something once lived there that we no longer remember. It's strange, isn't it, to think that the very thing we associate with silence and emptiness, ice, might also be the greatest storyteller on Earth. Every flake that falls, every layer that forms, is a line in the planet's diary. Air bubbles from ancient atmospheres, dust from distant deserts, pollen from forests long vanished. These frozen layers hold the breath of epochs, and if ice can preserve the whisper of air from 1,000,000 years ago, why not the faint traces of lives, of tools, of civilizations swallowed by cold? When we think of lost worlds, our minds often turn toward the sea. Atlantis, Lioness, the cities said to lie beneath the waves. But there's another ocean, one made of ice, not water, that has also swallowed whole continents. During the great ice ages, vast sheets spread across the planet, kilometers thick, grinding mountains into dust, locking away entire regions from light. It's easy to imagine that any people who once lived there would simply vanish from history's record, their works crushed beneath tons of frozen time. Scientists have found forests under the ice. Not fossils, but actual wood trunks and roots from trees that once grew in Antarctica's now buried valleys. They found pollen, seeds, and even the chemical traces of ancient rain. That means Antarctica was once green, warm, alive. It had rivers, lakes, and soil soft enough for roots to dig into. And if it was once alive, could it also have once been inhabited? We like to think we're the first civilization to map the globe, to build monuments, to shape nature to our will. But what if the planet has seen this before? What if, in some forgotten chapter, another species, or perhaps even another branch of humanity, rose to complexity during a brief warm age, only to be erased when the world froze again? Ice would not destroy everything at once. It would encase, compress, and seal. Beneath the glacial weight, time would slow. Buildings would crumble, yes, but gradually, under layers that might protect as much as they bury. The thought might sound like science fiction, but the Earth's memory is far longer than ours, and its silence far deeper. Imagine walking across a glacier today, wind sweeping over a field of blue-white ridges. The air stings your skin, the horizon glows faintly with cold light. Everything feels empty, but deep below, perhaps miles down, there could be stone carvings entombed in ice, a city's bones twisted and preserved in crystalline stillness. The world beneath your feet might be less a blank sheet than a palimpsest, a page rewritten by each new epoch but never entirely erased. In some ways, the idea of civilizations lost to the cold fits naturally with what we know about the planet's rhythms. Earth warms and cools in great cycles, pulses that span tens or hundreds of thousands of years. Glaciers advance, then retreat. Oceans rise, then fall. Forests spread, then shrink back to memory. Each shift resets the stage. Species adapt or perish. Landscapes are remade. And in that slow breathing of the world, Entire histories could come and go without leaving a clear trace. Even our own civilization, as young as it is, would not survive such a freeze intact. Imagine if all human structures, cities, towers, satellites, were buried under a new ice age. In just a few thousand years, the weight of ice would flatten skyscrapers, grind bridges into sand. In a million years, the evidence of us might be reduced to faint chemical hints trapped in ice cores, traces of metals, industrial soot, subtle changes in atmospheric gases. To any future species uncovering that record, it would be nearly impossible to tell what we were like, what we built, what we dreamed of. And if that's true for us, how many cycles might have already come and gone? How many times might the planet have reset the canvas, painting over everything with frost? The more we learn about Earth's polar regions, the more they seem to whisper of hidden worlds. In recent decades, radar has revealed entire mountain ranges beneath Antarctica's ice peaks, as tall as the Alps, valleys as deep as any found on land, lakes sealed under 4 kilometers of solid ice remain liquid thanks to heat rising from the planet's core. These lakes have been isolated for millions of years. Some contain bacteria unlike anything seen before. Others are so pristine, scientists hesitate to drill into them for fear of contamination. In those depths, life has endured in total darkness, without sunlight, without seasons. If life can survive there, might it also remember something we have forgotten? Ice doesn't just hide the past, it waits. It's a slow keeper of secrets. Every melting glacier today could be revealing not just rock and soil, but pieces of lost time. In Greenland, as the ice retreats, archaeologists have found Viking farms that were buried for centuries. In Siberia, mammoths and even human remains emerge, perfectly preserved, as if the ice itself decided it was time to return them. And if the ice still holds more, if something older, deeper, lies waiting, perhaps the world is not done revealing itself. Tonight, as we wander through this idea together, try not to think of it as a mystery to be solved. Think of it as a lullaby written in frost. Each question a note, each pause a flake drifting through air. We'll move slowly, through the landscapes of imagination and memory, through the possible and the impossible. The ice is not our enemy. It is the planet's memory, its heartbeat slowed to the rhythm of eternity. So, if the world beneath the glaciers once held cities, if minds once thrived there in warmth before the long freeze came, then perhaps they are still there, somewhere under the silent white, frozen not in death but in waiting, waiting for the thaw, for discovery, or simply for the next listener to wonder. Take another breath. Feel the stillness of this moment. The planet is old, the ice is patient, and we are small and warm and temporary. But that's all right, because for a little while we get to ask, what if civilizations disappeared beneath the ice? And maybe, just maybe, the ice is listening. Chapter 1. The Stillness of Ice. Imagine standing on a plain of endless white. The air is so still that even your breath seems to hesitate before it fades. There is no sound except the faint creak of distant ice, shifting under its own ancient weight. Above, the sky stretches pale and wide, a soft gradient between blue and silver. The world feels empty here, but it isn't. It's simply quiet in a way that few places ever are, a kind of quiet that carries memory instead of noise. Beneath your feet lies not just frozen water, but time itself, compressed into crystal and silence. This is where our story begins, not in cities or jungles or deserts, but in this stillness. The kind of stillness that can make you feel both insignificant and eternal. When you listen closely, you might almost hear it, the whisper of snow settling on snow, the sigh of air trapped a million years ago, escaping through a small crack in the ice. Each sound is a heartbeat from another world. The ice remembers things that nothing else does. When scientists drill deep into glaciers, the cores they pull up are like scrolls of the Earth's past. Layer upon layer, flake upon flake, each one capturing the atmosphere of the time it fell. Tiny bubbles of air hold traces of ancient climates, even the breath of animals long extinct. Dust particles tell of deserts and fires and volcanoes. The deeper the layer, the older the memory. Some cores reach back hundreds of thousands of years, each centimetre representing decades of frozen time. When you hold a piece of that ice in your hand, you're holding air that hasn't touched the open sky since before there were cities, before there were humans at all. But what if it isn't only air and dust that have been sealed away? What if the ice has kept other secrets, more complicated ones? Things not just formed by nature, but shaped by hands, or by something that once had hands. The Earth has frozen and thawed many times over its history. Continents have drifted, oceans have risen and fallen. Whole ecosystems have come and gone, leaving behind only traces faint enough to confuse even the most careful scientist. And if the planet can erase forests and mountains, it can certainly erase a civilization. Ice is deceptive. From above, it looks like nothing could ever live or last within it. But deep below, it moves like a slow ocean. It flows, crawls, sighs across the land in patient waves that no eye can see in motion. Glaciers grind rock into powder. They lift entire mountains and carry them miles away, dropping them like forgotten thoughts when the seasons turn. Yet within that immense silent movement, there are places where stillness reigns for millions of years. Pockets of stability, quiet vaults, where whatever is caught remains untouched. A leaf, a bone, a structure, a story. It's strange to imagine that something so cold, so alien to life, could also be a perfect cradle for it. In Siberia, scientists once unearthed the remains of a flower that had been buried in permafrost for over 30,000 years. They managed to germinate its seeds, and the flower bloomed again, as though the millennia between had been nothing more than a long sleep. The same permafrost has yielded mammoths so well preserved that their fur still glows auburn under laboratory lights. In the Arctic, entire forests, roots, branches, even leaves have been found beneath the ice, still rich with ancient sap. If such delicate things can survive, could something more deliberate, more constructed, endure as well? Picture a world before this ice. The poles green and teeming with rivers, valleys lush with ferns, insects and creatures long vanished. Maybe, in that fleeting warm age, something intelligent walked those plains, something that looked up at the same stars and wondered how long its world would last. They might have built dwellings from stone or bone, perhaps even learned to shape metal from the earth. But the warmth faded. The skies grew heavy with snow. Year by year, the land fell asleep under white blankets that never melted again. The winds buried the paths, the rivers froze, and the last fires went out. What was left of them, houses, tools, thoughts, became layers in the glacier's heart. It's easy to think of such an idea as fantasy. We are trained to believe that civilization is recent, fragile, unique. But ice doesn't keep a calendar. It doesn't care what species built what or when. It keeps what it can and hides it from the surface until the time comes to reveal it. Every age of thaw has its revelations. When the last great ice sheets retreated at the end of the Pleistocene, they exposed valleys that no one living had ever seen before. Rivers carved through newly freed rock. Lakes formed in depressions left by melting glaciers. In their wake, they uncovered bones of creatures whose existence no one could have imagined. Mammoths, giant sloths, saber-toothed cats. To the first humans who stumbled upon those remains, they must have seemed like gods frozen in defeat. Perhaps one day, when this ice melts, something equally astonishing will rise from the meltwater. The stillness of ice has a way of reshaping our sense of time. We think of the present as solid, but in the shadow of glaciers, it becomes as fluid as water. Imagine an object sealed within the ice right now, something as simple as a ring, or as complex as a book. 1,000 years from now, it will still be there, slowly sinking deeper as the ice moves. 10,000 years, and it will be farther still, compacted, transformed. In 100,000 years, it might emerge again on another continent, carried across oceans by the quiet river of ice. Time inside a glacier is not measured in years, but in distances and densities. Everything becomes part of a slow drift toward memory. When explorers first reached the poles, they wrote of how the silence pressed against them like a presence. The air felt heavy, the horizon endless, the sound of cracking ice like distant thunder that never stopped. Some said they felt watched, though there was nothing to see but white. Maybe it was the ice itself, a presence old enough to feel sentient. In the stillness, they were intruders, standing on the surface of something ancient and sleeping. And perhaps that feeling wasn't entirely wrong. The ice does not forget, and it doesn't welcome disturbance. When it moves with purpose. When it breaks with memory. Sometimes I wonder if this is what deep time sounds like. This quiet groaning, this soft collapse of snow. The pace of glaciers reminds us how brief we are. Our entire species, our histories, our monuments, all would fit within a single blink of the planet's frozen eye. Yet that same ice that erases us also preserves us. It has already saved traces of our world in its layers, traces of our pollution, our fires, our wars. Someday, far in the future, another intelligence might drill down through the frozen strata and find our chemical fingerprints, the residue of our time here. They might hold a fragment of ice and read it as we read ancient scripts, trying to understand what we were, what we hoped for, what we feared. So the stillness of ice isn't emptiness. Its presence deep, enduring, patient presence. It's the part of the earth that waits while everything else changes. It has seen oceans turn to desert and deserts turn to sea. It has watched continents drift like slow thoughts across the globe. It remembers everything that touches it and carries those memories silently beneath the surface. When we stand upon it, we're standing not just on frozen water, but on the layered memory of the world. And maybe, if we listen long enough to the quiet between our own breaths, we might hear it speaking not in words, but in the soft rhythm of melt and freeze, the pulse of time itself. The ice is still, but it is never asleep. It's moving even now, very slowly, reshaping everything beneath it, hiding, revealing, dreaming. Perhaps one day, when the last of the glaciers retreat, they'll tell us what they've seen, what civilizations vanished beneath their patience, and what stories were too fragile for the warmth of the sun, but strong enough to endure the cold. Until then, the stillness holds. The planet breathes in frozen time, and the ice keeps its secrets. Chapter 2. What ice can hide. If you stand long enough in a frozen place, the mind begins to play tricks. The horizon blurs into a single white thought, and the world feels suspended like breath held too long. In that strange silence, the imagination wakes. You start to wonder what lies below. Beneath the snow, beneath the ancient ice, what stories are sleeping? What if the ground you're standing on is not just ground, but the roof of a forgotten world? It's hard for us to grasp just how deep ice can go. The Antarctic sheet, for instance, reaches more than 4 kilometers thick in some places. That's taller than any mountain in Europe, thicker than the distance from the surface of the ocean to its darkest trench. Under that depth, there are entire mountain ranges, valleys and river systems, whole landscapes hidden in permanent shadow. Satellite imaging and radar mapping have revealed their shapes. Jagged ridges, sweeping plains, and deep channels that look eerily like river deltas. In one sense, it's as though another Earth exists beneath the one we know, a ghost planet entombed in glass. Ice doesn't just bury what's beneath it, it transforms it. Pressure turns snow into dense crystal, water into stone. Time becomes a kind of sculptor, smoothing and grinding everything it covers. If a city were to fall under a glacier, it wouldn't remain as a city for long. Walls would bow, towers would fold, roads would twist into ribbons of sediment. But traces might linger, the geometry of foundations, the outlines of unnatural angles, a line too, straight to be the work of rivers or wind. Beneath miles of ice, even erosion slows to stillness. What's lost might not be gone forever, only hidden, waiting for the next thaw. There's something poetic about the way ice chooses what to preserve and what to erase. A bone might survive where a tree crumbles. A tool might remain while the hand that made it is long dust. The cold is impartial but also strangely gentle. In frozen caves we've found animals with their fur still soft, their last meals still inside them, their eyes glassy but unbroken. The cold doesn't destroy, it holds, and in that holding, it keeps time in suspension. Somewhere deep under the Greenland ice, scientists recently detected faint radar reflections that shouldn't exist. Shapes that look like stone ridges, too regular, too symmetrical to be entirely natural. They're cautious about what it might mean. The simplest explanation is geology, rock formations carved by ancient glaciers. But the possibility lingers that something once stood there, something built when that land was free of ice. The idea doesn't have to mean civilization as we understand it. It could have been a structure of any kind, a settlement, a monument, or something even older, built by hands we no longer recognize. When the world freezes, it forgets the details of the moment before. The last grass dies, the rivers stop, and what once lived becomes a whisper beneath the frost. But the Earth's history shows that this forgetting is never permanent. The planet moves in cycles, breathing in and out over eons. Ice comes, then recedes. Deserts bloom where oceans once were, and the sea returns to places that were mountains. Every time the ice melts, it gives something back: fossils, forests, bones, ruins. The last great thaw revealed the buried mammoth steppe of Siberia and the tundra plains of Alaska. The next one might reveal more than bones. When explorers cross the polar deserts, they sometimes speak of mirages, dark shapes on the horizon that shimmer and fade, tricking the eye into seeing mountains or towers or even the suggestion of movement. Some of those illusions are only tricks of light, but some have turned out to be real. Rocky spires, pressure ridges, cliffs emerging as the ice shifts. I sometimes wonder how many shapes lie below that are not yet seen. Whole silhouettes frozen in shadow, slowly being carved into light. Ice is deceptive like that. What looks like emptiness can hold entire worlds. We know that under Antarctica there are lakes sealed off from the atmosphere for millions of years. Lake Vostok, one of the largest, lies buried beneath nearly 4 kilometers of ice and spans more than 12,000 square kilometers. Its water has not touched air since before humans existed. And yet, when samples of its ice were analyzed, they revealed traces of living organisms, tiny ancient bacteria that have persisted in complete isolation. If life can endure there, it means that isolation itself isn't death. It's waiting. Preservation, not extinction. Now imagine something larger than a microbe, preserved in that same way, not alive perhaps, but intact. Tools, carvings, fragments of walls. The ice would hold them as perfectly as it holds air bubbles or fossils, keeping them locked away through ages of darkness. To find them would be to step into a message written in the oldest ink of all: cold. Even now, the ice is beginning to retreat. Glaciers are shrinking, the poles warming. With each melt season, new land is exposed, land that hasn't seen sunlight for tens of thousands of years. In some places, ancient forests emerge, their roots still gripping the soil. In others, fragments of bone, tools, even remnants of human habitation appear. It's not impossible that deeper beneath, as more ice gives way, older secrets might rise too. The thought carries both awe and sadness. Every revelation the ice offers comes with a cost, the loss of what kept it hidden. There's another layer to this idea, something more subtle. Ice doesn't only hide physical things, it also hides histories, climates, entire versions of Earth that we've never known. Deep within the cores scientists extract, there are records of carbon levels, oxygen ratios, traces of cosmic dust. These chemical patterns are like fingerprints of the planet's moods, its moments of fire and flood, its long dreams of cold. From those patterns, we can see that the planet has frozen over completely more than once. During those snowball Earth events, even the equator may have been encased in ice. For millions of years, sunlight would have reflected off white plains stretching from pole to pole. The oceans froze over, but life continued beneath, adapting to the dark, inventing new ways to survive. When the planet thawed again, it emerged transformed. Each deep freeze was a kind of reset, a clearing of the slate. What might have lived before those resets, what might have vanished into the ice, never to return. Myths around the world seem to remember something like this. A great cold, a sky turned white, a flood that came after. The Norse spoke of Fimbulwinter, an endless season of frost before the world's renewal. The Hopi spoke of earlier worlds that ended in ice. Even the Greeks told of Hyperborea, a paradise beyond the north wind, swallowed by snow. We call them stories, but stories often grow from memories, and memories often come from truth. Could it be that these ancient whispers are not just metaphor, but echoes of ages when ice reshaped everything? Standing in the middle of a glacier, you can feel how easily it could hold an entire age within itself. The air feels dense with weight and history. Somewhere underfoot could be the frozen riverbeds of forgotten continents, or the last remnants of a forest that once stretched from pole to pole. There might be the outline of a structure, a tool, a fossilized path cut through stone. The thought isn't just fanciful, it's geological. The Earth's layers are libraries, and ice is one of its oldest archives. As night settles over the polar plateau, the stars above feel almost too close, as if the cold has cleared the distance between here and the infinite. The light they send down glitters off the ice, reflecting softly, as though the planet itself were answering. The wind sighs through fissures and over crests, whispering stories that no one alive remembers. It's easy to imagine that if you waited long enough, the ice might speak not in words, but in shifts and creaks. in the slow exhale of trapped air finding its way home. Ice can hide almost anything. It can swallow forests, rivers, and the bones of giants. It can keep entire ages secret beneath its frozen breath. But the thing it hides most perfectly is time itself. Everything caught within it stops aging, stops changing, and in that timelessness, there is both loss and mercy. Whatever was buried remains, waiting, uncorrupted by weather or decay. The ice may one day melt, revealing what it kept, or it may hold its treasures forever, guarding them against even the gaze of the sun. And as we drift deeper into this frozen thought, one question begins to take shape, quiet but insistent. If ice can hide so much forests, rivers, mountains, even traces of life, what else could be resting beneath it still, silent and preserved, dreaming in the cold dark? Perhaps the first pages of our planet's story are not written in stone but sealed in ice, waiting for someone patient enough to listen. Chapter 3. The Planet Before the Freeze. Long before the first ice took its grip on the world, Earth was a place of warmth and colour. The continents were not the same shapes we know today, nor were they in the same places. They drifted, slowly but restlessly, over molten currents deep beneath the crust, and their faces were stranger than we could ever imagine. There were forests where deserts now lie, and seas where mountain ranges would one day rise. The poles were green then, breathing with life. Rivers wound across them, full of creatures long forgotten, and winds carried the scent of soil, not snow. It's difficult for us, living in the shadow of glaciers and polar storms, to picture that world clearly, to imagine Antarctica as a rainforest, to think of the Arctic Circle glowing with twilight jungles. But that is what the planet was, once, a cradle of heat and movement, long before it became a kingdom of ice. If you were standing there, then let's say 100 million years ago, the air would have felt thicker, wetter. The sun, slightly dimmer than today, would hang lower on the horizon, its light filtered through heavy clouds of moisture. Giant ferns would spread across the ground like fans, and dragonflies the size of birds would hum through the humid air. Great reptiles would move slowly among the trees, not the sharp-toothed predators of popular imagination, but sluggish, wide-bodied grazers resting in the shade. The night would never be silent. Insects buzzing, wind sighing through palm-like fronds, the slow drip of condensation from leaves taller than houses. In those ancient eras, the planet's pulse was faster. Volcanoes breathed constantly, exhaling warmth and carbon dioxide that wrapped the world in a gentle haze. The continents were different too, clustered together or stretching apart in ways that made coastlines unpredictable. The sea level rose and fell in long, lazy rhythms. Warm currents carried life from one side of the world to the other, knitting ecosystems together across vast distances. Even near the poles, the waters shimmered with plankton, and coral reefs spread like lace beneath the waves. The Earth was a living, sweating organism. To imagine that time is to understand that cold is not the planet's default state. Ice is the exception, not the rule. The frozen ages we now take for granted, the glittering caps at the poles, the glaciers sliding across continents are only temporary moods in a story that is mostly warm. For most of its existence, the planet has been green and blue, rich and teeming. Only occasionally does it fall asleep under white blankets, and when it does, everything that lived before becomes hidden beneath them. That's the rhythm of Earth, life surging forward, then pausing, forests rising, then buried, warmth giving way to silence. When we talk about the planet before the freeze, we're not speaking of one specific time, but of many. There were countless ages of warmth. The Carboniferous period, more than 300 million years ago, was one of them. The air then was so full of oxygen that fires could start with a single spark, and insects grew enormous, unafraid of predators that hadn't yet evolved. Swamps covered much of the land, their waters still and black, their edges thick with moss and bark. It was in those swamps that the coal of our modern world was born, compressed over eons into the seams we now mine. Every time we light a fire or turn on a light powered by coal, we're burning the memory of that warm, green earth. Later came the Cretaceous period, another fever dream of heat. The continents were beginning to resemble their modern forms, but the climate was still tropical almost everywhere. Dinosaurs flourished in every corner of the planet, from equator to pole. Fossils found in Antarctica show that forests grew there too. forests so dense that even in the half-year darkness of polar night, they thrived. Imagine that. Trees drinking in the faint light of the moon, growing slowly, nourished by soil that would one day turn to ice. In those forests, rivers ran that have long since frozen, and lakes shimmered where glaciers now sleep. The warmth wasn't endless. Slowly, the planet began to shift. Mountain chains rose, altering air currents and redirecting oceans. The great volcanic breaths subsided. Dust from new peaks began to scatter. Sunlight, cooling the skies. Somewhere, deep in the ocean, the balance tipped. Carbon sank, oxygen rose, and the long, slow descent into cold began. The change wasn't sudden. It took millions of years so gradual that no single generation of life would have noticed. But one by one, the forests retreated. The swamps dried. The seas cooled. Ice appeared at the poles for the first time in ages, small and temporary at first, then larger, thicker, more determined. It's tempting to think that life must have panicked when the first frost came. But life adapts in silence. When the warmth fled the poles, new creatures evolved to thrive in the chill. Feathers thickened, fur grew dense, metabolisms quickened. Where forests died, tundras spread. The earth was redrawing itself, turning green into white. And in that transition, many things were lost species, yes, but also entire environments, whole chapters of ecology now buried. Every frozen valley in Antarctica was once a river basin. Every icy plateau was once a meadow or a marsh. The glaciers are archives, and what they hold are the lost maps of a living planet. Sometimes, when scientists find pollen grains buried deep beneath the ice, they can reconstruct fragments of those lost worlds. They see hints of species that no longer exist, flowers with strange shapes, trees unlike any in today's catalogues. And each discovery is like hearing an echo from another time, a faint voice calling through the cold. Those voices remind us that Earth was not always this way, that the silence of the poles is only temporary. Beneath the frost, the memory of sunlight still sleeps. There's a theory that before one of the great freezes, there may have been civilizations or at least precursors to civilizations during one of those long warm epochs. Not humans as we know them, but perhaps intelligent species shaped by entirely different climates. It sounds like myth, but in a planet that has lived billions of years, who's to say what may have flourished and been erased in the gaps we cannot yet see? If such a civilization existed, its traces would now be buried far beneath the polar ice, compressed into stone and crystal, indistinguishable from geology itself. The planet has a way of folding its past into its present, hiding the extraordinary within the ordinary. Even without such speculation, the fact that the poles once bloomed is enough to humble us. We tend to think of the world as stable, as ours, but the truth is that we are just passing through its moods. It has been a fiery planet, a watery one, a frozen one, and a fertile one. Each version of Earth feels permanent while it lasts, and each eventually gives way to the next. Somewhere under the ice, the fossils of tropical ferns and prehistoric rivers are waiting as proof. They remind us that nothing the Earth does is final, not even the deep freeze. At night, when the auroras move across the polar sky like slow living curtains, it's easy to imagine that they are memories too, the last traces of that earlier world rising into light. Their colours seem to shimmer with warmth, even though the air below is colder than death. Maybe that's the planet remembering itself, its green jungles, its red sunsets, its endless summers. Maybe the lights are reminders that the ice has not won, only paused the story. The planet before the freeze was not perfect. It was wild and unstable and full of extinction, but it was alive in every direction. And that aliveness never truly left. It's buried there still, beneath kilometers of frozen silence, waiting for the next turning of the planet's great breath. The warmth will return one day, perhaps far beyond our time, but inevitably. And when it does, the ice will retreat again, revealing what it has hidden. Rivers will flow through valleys that haven't seen water in millions of years. Forests will bloom on the bones of glaciers, and somewhere perhaps the remnants of forgotten ages will see daylight once more. For now, the memory of that ancient warmth rests quietly beneath the ice, like an ember under ash. The world seems frozen, but beneath the surface, it still remembers the shape of sunlight. Chapter 4. The Great Freezes of Earth. There is a rhythm to the planet, though it moves far too slowly for us to hear. We live in moments measured by years or decades, but Earth's heartbeat pulses in millions. It warms, it cools, it breathes in glaciers and exhales oceans. Every so often, the pendulum swings so far toward the cold that nearly everything changes. Ice stretches from the poles toward the equator, covering continents in thick sheets. Seas retreat, winds sharpen, and life itself must bend or break beneath the pressure of the cold. These are the great freezes of Earth chapters, when the planet seemed to stop moving, to hold its breath beneath layers of white. When scientists speak of the ice ages, they do not mean one singular event but many. The Earth has frozen and thawed again and again, a slow and cyclical dance that has shaped every landscape we know. The most dramatic of these events, long before humanity appeared, was something geologists call snowball Earth. It happened more than 500 million years ago, when almost the entire planet lay entombed in ice. Even the equatorial oceans froze solid, their surfaces glittering like mirrors in the faint light of a dimmer sun. Volcanoes fell silent beneath snow. Winds ceased. The sky grew pale and still. For tens of millions of years, the Earth remained this way, a frozen pearl drifting through space. The thought of it is almost impossible to grasp. Imagine standing anywhere at all, and seeing only ice. Not just mountains capped in white, but entire continents, entire seas, the familiar blues and greens of our world replaced by endless silver. If there were clouds, they would have been thin, ghostly, reflecting the sunlight away instead of trapping it. Even the air would have felt different, thinner, drier, too cold to carry sound for long. Beneath the crust of that frozen skin, however, the planet's heart kept beating. Deep in the oceans, beneath the solid shell of ice, hydrothermal vents continued to pour heat into the water, creating tiny havens for life. Around those vents, primitive organisms clung to existence, feeding on minerals and chemical reactions rather than sunlight. They were the Earth's last embers, flickering in the dark, refusing to die. The strange beauty of that time is that life did not end, it adapted. When the planet thawed again, as it always eventually does, those survivors flourished. Some scientists believe that the end of Snowball Earth sparked an explosion of complexity in living things, leading to the Cambrian era when multicellular life bloomed across the seas. In that sense, the great freezes are not just moments of destruction, they are moments of transformation. The ice comes to erase, yes, but also to prepare the canvas for what comes next. Even after the planet thawed, the cycles continued. Smaller ice ages came and went, carving valleys, grinding mountains into sand. Each one left its signature in the rock, a story written in layers of silt and frost. When you walk through a canyon today and see the bands of colour and texture along the walls, you're looking at the pulse of those ancient freezes, warm epochs marked by red and gold, cold ones by grey and white. The land itself remembers every winter that has ever come. Much later, when life had filled the continents and forests had spread from shore to shore, another series of freezes began. This time, it wasn't total, it was rhythmic. Over the last 2.5 million years, Earth has swung through more than 20 such cycles, each lasting tens of thousands of years. Ice would build, then retreat, then build again. The pattern was driven by subtle changes in the planet's orbit and tiny wobbles that shifted how sunlight touched the surface. When the angle favoured warmth, the glaciers melted back toward the poles, and when it favoured cold, they crept outward once more. These are the ice ages our ancestors knew, the ones that shaped the world we eventually inherited. The last of them ended only about 12,000 years ago, so recently, in geological time, that the Earth hasn't quite settled. If you've ever wondered why so many myths across cultures speak of floods, frozen lands, and sudden changes in the sky, it might be because those stories are memories of that time. Human beings lived through the last thaw. They watched the glaciers pull back and the oceans rise to swallow their coastlines. They must have seen rivers burst free from the ice, carrying stones the size of houses and reshaping entire valleys overnight. To them, the planet itself must have seemed alive, capable of anger and mercy in equal measure. It's easy to imagine them huddled around fires at the edge of melting plains, telling stories to make sense of what they saw. Tales of gods who froze the world and then warmed it again. Myths of lands swallowed by snow and later returned by the sea. Perhaps, in their own way, they were remembering not just their own time, but the deep memory of the planet, the earlier freezes that had already come and gone long before humankind existed. The Earth carries that memory in its bones, and somehow, through intuition or inheritance, so do we. Each ice age changes the face of the planet. When glaciers move, they carve everything they touch. Mountains lose their sharpness, valleys deepen and widen, rivers are redirected, lakes are born in the basins left behind. Even the soil beneath our feet, the rich dark ground that grows our food, was shaped by those long winters. It's made from the crushed remains of rock ground fine under miles of moving ice. Without those ancient freezes, there would be no fertile plains, no rivers as we know them, no landscapes shaped for us to inhabit. Ice destroys, but it also creates. If you could travel back to the height of the last glacial maximum, about 20,000 years ago, you would find a planet that feels both familiar and alien. The northern continents would be unrecognizable. Canada and much of Europe buried beneath ice sheets more than 3 kilometers thick. The sea level would be lower by hundreds of feet, exposing vast new coastlines. The deserts would be larger, the rainforests smaller. Across the frozen north, mammoths, mastodons, and woolly rhinoceroses would roam through pale grasslands, adapted to the cold. Human beings would live at the edges of that world, following the warmth, migrating wherever the ice allowed. Civilization, in the way we think of it now, could not exist there. The cold demanded simplicity, endurance, humility. It made the world quieter, slower, more contemplative. And yet, even then, beneath the surface, the planet was preparing to change again. Ice is not a permanent ruler. Its reign always ends. Beneath the frozen crust, volcanic fires stir, ocean currents shift, and sunlight slowly tips the balance back toward warmth. When that happens, the world softens, ice cracks, rivers return, life expands into the spaces it once retreated from. That's the rhythm that has played out countless times. Each freeze is both an ending and a beginning. Sometimes I wonder if the planet needs these pauses, these long stretches of stillness to reset itself. Perhaps the ice ages are its way of remembering what balance feels like. In the quiet cold, the noise of growth stops, the forests sleep, and everything takes a breath. When the warmth returns, it feels new again, as if the world has been reborn. There's a certain comfort in that thought, that even in the deepest winter life is only resting. The same is true of us, in our own smaller cycles of rise and fall. We retreat, we rebuild, we thaw. The great freezes of Earth remind us that permanence is an illusion. Nothing stays as it is. Continents shift, climates change, civilizations rise and vanish. But in the long rhythm of the planet, each disappearance is also a preparation for the next creation. Ice, with all its cold indifference, is part of that endless renewal. It may bury what came before, but it also protects, preserving the faint outlines of the world beneath. And when it finally melts away, it reveals not just what was lost, but what can still return. The glaciers move so slowly that you could live 100 lifetimes and never notice their motion. Yet over the course of millennia, they reshape everything. Their silence is deceptive. Within it is the power to sculpt continents. The next great freeze may come long after we are gone, but it will come. And when it does, it will carry the echoes of all the ages, before the same long breath of cold, the same promise of renewal. The earth will exhale another blanket of white, and the cycle will continue, quiet and vast, as it always has. Chapter 5. Civilizations Lost to the Cold. If you could peel back the layers of ice covering this planet, if you could descend through each frozen century, the way divers move through the depths of the sea, you might find not just fossils and stones, but something else. Something that once had walls, streets, and firelight. Civilizations do not always end in fire. Some simply fall asleep in snow. It's easy to think of cold as empty, but it is just another kind of silence, a slow, patient one that keeps secrets better than any ocean. Perhaps beneath these ancient glaciers are the echoes of worlds that once thrived, now sealed away in stillness. Imagine a civilization born during a brief and gentle interlude, one of those rare warm periods between ice ages. The world would have been green again then, the tundra soft with moss and rivers singing through open plains. People or beings not entirely unlike us might have found their footing there. They might have built homes from stone and bone, dug canals, told stories around fires, watched the same stars we watch now. They could have risen slowly, mastering the world within reach, believing that the mild seasons would last forever. But the earth has its own plans. The warmth always ends, and when the first frost returned, it would have begun quietly one winter longer than usual, then another still. At first, it wouldn't have felt like an ending. Perhaps they adapted. Perhaps they learned to build thicker walls, to burn more fuel, to hunt creatures that thrived in the snow. They would have watched the animals change, coats growing dense and white, migrations stretching longer each year. Rivers would freeze earlier, trees would die back. The sun would climb lower in the sky and linger there, pale and tired. And slowly, their world would begin to shrink. Fields would disappear beneath frost. Lakes would vanish under ice. Their maps would become irrelevant as the glaciers advanced, swallowing valleys, devouring forests, remaking the landscape in their slow, relentless way. It's strange to think how long a civilization might resist before surrendering to the cold. Some might have migrated south, chasing the warmth, carrying with them the remnants of their culture, songs, tools, language, memory. Others might have stayed, stubborn and hopeful, retreating underground or into caves, where the temperature stayed just bearable, where fires could still survive. Perhaps they built tunnels to connect their shelters, carving through rock and ice, living by torchlight, and listening to the muffled groan of the glacier above. Life could continue that way for generations, long enough for the memory of sunlight to become legend. Children born into that world might never have seen the sky. They would think of the ice above them not as a threat, but as the ceiling of their universe. The cold doesn't come all at once. It creeps, it persuades, and in that slow persuasion, entire cultures can dissolve. Without drama, fading rather than falling, their architecture might remain buried, their artifacts sealed in permafrost, their names forgotten. The only survivors would be whispers carried forward through stories, legends of golden ages, of lands swallowed by snow, of gods who punished the world with endless winter. Even today, those stories linger in fragments scattered across cultures. The Greeks spoke of Hyperborea, a shining realm beyond the north wind, said to vanish in ice. The Norse told of Niflheim, the frozen land of beginnings and endings. The Siberians have tales of cities made of crystal, buried beneath eternal frost. The echoes are faint, but they align in a pattern too old to ignore. Perhaps these myths are the final messages of those who once lived through such endings. When archaeologists unearth remnants of ancient human settlements, they find that almost every civilization ends abruptly, often coinciding with sudden shifts in climate. The Indus Valley, the Mayan jungles, the Norse colonies of Greenland, all touched by the hand of weather turning against them. We tend to imagine wars or plagues as the cause of collapse, but perhaps climate is the quiet architect of disappearance. The earth tilts, the seasons change, and life must yield. The difference is only of degree. For those who lived in the shadow of the last great glaciers, that tilt would have been catastrophic. Imagine a people watching the horizon vanish, the sky filling not with clouds but with ice. Each year, the light dims a little more. We know that when glaciers move, they bury everything in their path. Rocks, forests, rivers all vanish beneath the weight, but they also preserve. Inside the ice, the temperature never changes much. Decay slows to nothing. Bacteria sleep. The very air is trapped in bubbles like ancient lungs. It's not impossible to think that under the oldest layers of ice there could still be objects, tools, carvings, remnants of walls left by hands that existed before any of our known ancestors walked the earth. The ice is indifferent to what it keeps. A mammoth or a monument, it holds them the same way, with equal silence. In some ways, we've already seen glimpses of such preservation. In Siberia, hunters have uncovered the bodies of mammoths so well kept that their fur still carries a trace of warmth, their eyes still reflect light. Near the edges of Greenland, wooden structures, centuries old, emerge from the melting permafrost, their shapes still sharp, their fibres unrotted. And in Antarctica, radar scans reveal buried ridges and circular anomalies beneath the ice sheets, shapes that do not fit the randomness of nature. Scientists call them subglacial formations, but their symmetry is unsettling. Are they just geological coincidences, or the ruins of something older than our history, sealed away by the cold before we learned to write. It might sound like fantasy, but so much of what we once called myth has turned out to be truth, merely waiting to be confirmed. Once, we thought no continent could lie beneath Antarctica's ice, until sonar revealed mountains and valleys. We thought no life could exist without sunlight, until we found ecosystems thriving under miles of frozen water. Perhaps what we call the impossible is simply what the ice hasn't yet revealed. Civilization, after all, is not permanent. It rises and falls like the tide, and there is no reason to believe we are the first to build or the last to fade. Sometimes, when I think of those hypothetical civilizations, I imagine what they must have left behind. Not grand temples or metal towers, but smaller things. The everyday marks of living. Pottery, tools, carvings of animals they once hunted, fragments of music scratched into stone. Maybe they wrote stories too, in symbols that now lie crushed under pressure, waiting for the light of a future thaw. Maybe they dreamed, as we do, of preserving themselves against time. If so, they succeeded, just not in the way they intended. They live now as possibilities, as questions we can't stop asking. There's a quiet dignity in that idea that a civilization can disappear into the ice and still leave behind its essence, even if no one remembers its name. The glaciers become their tombs and their monuments at once. When the ice melts again, as it inevitably will, some trace might emerge, a fragment, a pattern, a line that doesn't belong, and when it does, perhaps someone will look at it and recognize something familiar. The curve of a tool, the symmetry of intention, the echo of a mind. The cold may seem final, but it is only another phase. The earth has frozen before and will freeze again, and each time it does, it carries forward a memory of everything it has touched. If civilizations truly were lost to the cold, then they are not gone. They are sleeping, preserved in the heart of glaciers, in silence so deep that even time forgets to move. Someday, when the planet exhales and the ice pulls back, the world will uncover their faces once more. Until then, they remain there beneath our feet, beneath the weight of centuries, their fires long extinguished, but their stories intact, waiting for the sun. Chapter 6. When oceans froze. There is a moment in the memory of the planet when even the seas stopped breathing. We tend to imagine ice as something that belongs to the mountains, the poles, the far reaches of the world. But once, long ago, it reached everywhere. It spread across the continents, down through valleys, over plains, and finally out into the open water. The oceans, those vast living lungs of Earth, froze from the top down, sealing themselves beneath a lid of ice so thick that sunlight could no longer reach their depths. Beneath that barrier, darkness settled. Waves ceased. The tide still moved faintly under the pressure, but the familiar rhythm of surf and current was gone. The planet had become a single sleeping sphere of frost. Imagine standing on the edge of that ocean. The air would be so still it would hum in your ears. Before you, where water should stretch endlessly to the horizon, there would be only white to a plain of frozen glass stretching farther than you could walk. It would gleam faintly under a pale sun, smooth in some places, cracked and heaving in others, where the ice ground against itself like the slow turning of stone. The sound would be haunting, distant groans and sharp pops as pressure built and released, like the planet sighing in its sleep. Beneath your feet, in total darkness, whole ecosystems would be caught in suspension. Fish frozen mid-swim, coral reefs encased in silence. Even the smallest plankton, those tiny architects of oxygen, halted in the act of living. The world had paused its own heartbeat. This is not speculation alone. Geological evidence tells us that this happened not once, but several times, periods scientists call snowball Earth events. During these freezes, ice extended from the poles to near the equator, turning the planet into a frozen mirror that reflected so much sunlight back into space that it deepened its own cold. The sea surface became a continent of ice, kilometers thick in places, pressing down on the life below. Beneath that weight, the water stayed liquid only because of the planet's inner warmth, heat rising from volcanic vents on the ocean floor. There, in the dark, life persisted, the same stubborn microbes that would one day give rise to everything else. It's humbling to imagine that every living thing we know today, every tree, every bird, every human, is descended from survivors of that long night. When the oceans froze, they did not die. They waited. Beneath the ice, Thermal vents became sanctuaries, glowing like underwater fires. Tiny organisms clustered there, feeding not on sunlight but on chemistry, drawing energy from minerals and heat instead of the sun's rays. In the absence of light, evolution found new paths. The deep became a refuge, and life learned to live in the dark. When the ice finally began to thaw, it must have been a slow and magnificent rebirth. Volcanoes erupted more frequently, spewing carbon dioxide that built up in the air, trapping heat. Gradually, the frozen oceans cracked open. Light poured into the depths for the first time in tens of millions of years. Imagine what that would have looked like from above. Great fissures opening in the white, ribbons of blue widening day by day, steam rising as the cold met the returning warmth. From the newly exposed seas, clouds would have lifted, rain would have fallen, and rivers would have begun again. The frozen world exhaled. To think of oceans freezing is to think of silence on an unimaginable scale. Every coastline erased, every wave stilled, entire coral continents crushed under ice. If there were any beings, then creatures aware enough to notice their world changing, they must have felt the weight of loneliness as no species has since. The light would fade earlier each day, the wind sharpen to a blade, the horizon would lose its shimmer, turning flat and colourless. And then, one night, the sea itself would begin to slow, to stiffen, to harden from the edges inward, until the water was no longer water at all, but glass, a mirror for the dim stars above. It's possible that such an event could happen again, in some far future epoch. The cycles of the planet never truly end. They only wait. Every few tens of thousands of years, the Earth tilts a little differently. Its orbit changes slightly, and the balance of warmth and cold shifts once more. The last great freeze, the one that ended 12,000 years ago, was just the most recent breath in a long rhythm. If the cycle continues, there will come another age when the poles grow, when snow piles higher, when the oceans themselves whisper towards stillness again. And when they do, everything we have built, our cities, our ships, noise will vanish beneath the returning calm. But even in imagining that, there's beauty. Ice, for all its indifference, is graceful in its purpose. It covers, it preserves, it purifies. When oceans freeze, they do not destroy what they hide. They keep it the way a library keeps its books closed between readings. The sediments beneath those ancient frozen seas still hold chemical traces of what lived before them. Carbon patterns, isotopic ratios, whispers of ancient atmospheres. Scientists studying them today are, in a sense, reading the diary the planet wrote in the language of ice. Every trapped bubble of air is a sentence, every layer a paragraph in the long autobiography of Earth. And perhaps there are chapters even we have not yet found, chapters written not by nature alone but by the hands of beings long vanished. The imagination easily wanders there. Civilizations that may have risen during one of those fleeting warm intervals. Civilizations that built near the shores of seas now lost. When the ice came, they would have watched it advance like a god of glass, slow and merciless. They might have fled inland, or downward, or simply waited, believing the cold would pass as all seasons do. When it didn't, their cities might have been swallowed by the encroaching white. And now, under ancient seabeds, beneath miles of frozen ocean, the traces of their existence might lie preserved in crystal layers, silent, perfect, waiting for the warmth to find them again. There's something profound in the thought that the ocean, the same one that birthed life, that connects every shore, that carries our reflections and our histories, can also vanish into stillness. We think of the sea as eternal movement, as pulse, as sound, yet the planet has proven otherwise. Even its most restless element can one day rest. In that rest, there's no malice, only balance. The Earth does not freeze to punish, nor thaw to forgive. It moves through its cycles with the calm of a being older than memory, older than time as we measure it. Imagine now the moment of transition, the precise instant when the ocean begins to freeze again. You are standing at its edge. The air is heavy, and the first crystals of frost begin to knit themselves together on the surface. You can hear the faint crackle of forming ice, like glass being born. The tide rolls in one last time, touches your boots, then pulls away beneath a skin of new frost. Within days the waves will be gone. Within weeks the horizon will turn solid. Within years the sound of the ocean will be only a memory carried by the wind. The planet will have entered its next dream, And when that dream ends, as all of them do, the thaw will come again. The ice will break. The frozen waves will collapse into water. Life will return, first tentatively, then in floods of colour and noise. The ocean will breathe once more, as though waking from a long sleep, unaware of how much time has passed. The cycle will continue, and the world will be new again. When oceans freeze, they do not end. They pause. The silence of ice is not death, it is waiting. Beneath that stillness lies the memory of every storm, every creature, every heartbeat that has ever belonged to the sea. And in that waiting, there is a kind of grace, a promise that even in the coldest depths, life endures, and the story of Earth, no matter how often it slows, will always find its way back to motion. Chapter 7: Myths of the Frozen North. Across every culture that has ever looked toward the horizon of ice, there are stories. They are not just tales of cold or of survival, but of memory. The kind of memory that doesn't live in books or bones, but in the pulse of language, passed from fire to fire, from one trembling voice to another. Myths of the frozen north stretch back farther than history, reaching into a time when the line between truth and dream was still blurred by snow. These are not just stories about the cold. They are stories, born of it, shaped by the hush of long winters and the haunting quiet that only the Arctic can create. The Greeks called that distant world Hyperborea, a land beyond the north wind, where the air was gentle and the people lived in peace under endless light. They said the sun never set there, that the north wind itself, Boreas, could not cross its borders. Hyperborea was not a place of suffering but of perfection, untouched by war or decay, and yet, even in their myth, it vanished. The Greeks believed the land had been hidden away, swallowed by snow, or perhaps lifted beyond mortal reach. To them, the north was both a paradise and a warning, a reminder that perfection can only exist in places we cannot return to. Other traditions remembered the north differently. The Norse told of Niflheim, a realm of mist and ice that existed before all creation, before fire, before gods. From its frozen rivers and fogs came the first stirrings of life. In that belief, cold was not the enemy, it was the womb of existence. It was silence before the song, stillness before the movement. And yet, even in their mythology, the north was something to be feared. Beyond their known world lay Jotunheim, land of frost giants, chaotic and unyielding. The Norse sagas speak of the gods venturing there and barely returning, their breath frosting in the bitter air, the horizon shimmering like glass. They knew that ice has two faces, one that preserves and one that destroys. Far to the east, the Yakut people of Siberia tell of a similar place, an ancient realm buried beneath the frozen ground. They say it was once a thriving land before the sky turned white, before endless winter came. The people there angered the spirits of the air, who brought down a storm that never ended. The snow fell for years until their world disappeared beneath it. But the Yakut also say that the land still exists, deep under the ice, glowing faintly with its own light. It is not dead, only waiting for forgiveness. What all these stories share is the sense that the cold is not empty. It is alive. It listens. It remembers. Cultures that lived closest to the ice always spoke of it as something conscious, something aware of those who walked upon it. The Inuit, for example, believe that every part of the Arctic, every animal, every gust of wind, every stretch of frozen sea has a spirit. These spirits are neither good nor evil. They are balance itself. The ice is not cruel, it is simply indifferent. But indifference can feel like divinity to those small enough to be swallowed by it. If you listen to these myths closely, a pattern begins to emerge. Again and again, there are hints of something lost to the cold cities swallowed, lands erased, beings transformed. The ice, in every story, acts as both punishment and preservation. It takes, but it also keeps. The Hyperboreans vanish into legend, but perhaps they are not gone. Perhaps they still live beneath the polar night. The Norse gods fear Niflheim's chill, but from that chill all creation came. The Siberians speak of a world sealed under frost, but they say it still glows. The ice is always more than what it seems. It is not an end, but a door. There's a quiet fascination in how ancient humans, separated by thousands of miles and without contact, all imagined the far north as a place of beginnings and endings. For those who lived in warmer climates, It represented mystery, a region unreachable, where the horizon dissolved into white and the air itself seemed to vanish. To those who lived within it, it represented endurance, a mirror of their own strength. For everyone, the North was sacred. It was where the world touched eternity. Modern explorers and scientists often speak of a strange feeling that comes over them in the high latitudes. They call it the polar silence. It isn't simply quiet, it's a kind of pressure, a dense stillness that feels almost like being watched. Instruments record nothing unusual, yet countless travelers describe the same sensation. Even today, with GPS and satellite images mapping every curve of the Earth, there are moments in the Arctic that defy description. The air thickens, the horizon blurs, time itself seems to slow. It's easy, in that kind of stillness, to understand why early people saw the ice as divine. It doesn't move to human rhythms, it waits on a scale of patience we can't comprehend. Perhaps the myths came from that feeling, from the realization that the ice is older than memory and will outlive us all. The people who first told these stories didn't have the vocabulary of geology or climatology, but they understood something deeper, that the world breathes in cycles, that warmth and cold trade places, like seasons of an infinite year. They understood that even the sun rests, that every fire has its winter, and that life must always pass through the cold to be renewed. And what if, hidden within those myths, there's more than metaphor? Some have suggested that legends like Hyperborea might be faint recollections of actual lands, places that did exist during warmer epochs, before the ice returned. During those brief interglacials, the Arctic would have been lush, its coasts habitable. People might have lived there, flourished there, and watched as the cold reclaimed everything. Their descendants, scattered south, would have carried the memory with them, the memory that turned to myth as generations passed. By the time they told the story again, the land was gone, buried under the frozen sea, and the only way to explain it was through legend. When you think about it that way, myth and geology begin to blur. The Earth writes its history in stone and ice. Humanity writes it in story and song. Sometimes the two overlap. What science calls snowball Earth might be the same event remembered in the world's oldest tales of eternal winter. What we call the last great thaw might be the floods remembered in Sumerian tablets or the deluge in the Bible. Maybe the frozen north that lives in our imagination isn't only a place on a map. It's a shared ancestral memory, a dream of survival carried through millennia of cold nights. Standing at the edge of the Arctic Circle, it's not hard to see why these stories endure. The light there feels different, softer, as though the sun is cautious not to disturb the sleep of the snow. When the aurora dances across the sky, it looks like something alive, something aware. The ice cracks and moans like it's speaking. The horizon trembles as if hiding a secret. In that light, the old myths feel close again, whispering through the wind. Maybe Hyperborea was real. Maybe Niflheim still breathes beneath the permafrost. Or maybe those places exist now only as reflections of what the ice does to us, how it humbles us, silences us, and reminds us that the world is older and more mysterious than we can ever know. Every culture that met the cold came away with reverence. To live near the ice was to learn patience, endurance, and the quiet art of listening. The ice tells no stories out loud, but it inspires them endlessly. Its silence is the canvas on which imagination paints. When we look north, we are looking not just toward geography, but toward memory, the memory of what the Earth has been and what it might become again. So when you hear the old myths of lost paradises and frozen realms, listen for the truth within them. They are not warnings or fantasies, they are recollections whispered across time. They remind us that warmth is always temporary, that the world renews itself through cycles of cold, and that beneath the frost, the heart of creation still beats. The frozen north has never been empty. It is alive with stories, waiting for us to be quiet enough to hear them. Chapter 8. The Science of Preservation. If you hold a piece of ancient ice in your hand, clear enough to see the faint glimmer of air bubbles inside, you are holding time itself. Within that frozen glass are fragments of the atmosphere, as it once was, oxygen exhaled by forests that no longer exist, carbon breathed out by creatures whose names we'll never know, even the subtle chemical traces of distant eruptions or ancient fires. Ice, for all its simplicity, is the planet's most faithful archivist. It remembers without judgment, without decay, without distortion. Where paper burns and stone erodes, ice simply keeps. It waits. The science of preservation begins with that waiting. When snow falls on the high glaciers of Antarctica or Greenland, it is not just snow, it is a record being written in real time. Each flake carries dust, salt, pollen, and gases from the air around it. As new snow layers build on top, the weight of centuries compresses them, turning snow into fern and then into solid ice. What was once the whisper of a single winter becomes a page in the planet's frozen library. Drilling down into those layers is like leafing through history 1 centimeter at a time. The deeper the core, the older the memory. Scientists have learned to read those pages with astonishing precision. A single bubble can tell them the concentration of carbon dioxide at the time it was trapped. A thin band of volcanic ash can reveal the exact year of an eruption. Even microscopic patterns in the ice crystals can trace the rhythm of past seasons, the slow breathing of Earth through cycles of warmth and cold. Ice cores taken from Antarctica reach back nearly 1 million years, and with each meter of depth, the world that emerges becomes stranger and more distant. We see not just climate, but catastrophe. Sudden spikes in carbon from ancient fires, traces of asteroid impacts, evidence of mass extinctions that change the face of life. Yet for all the scientific precision, there's something poetic in it too. The ice does not just record the planet's data, it holds its emotions, the warmth, the storms, the sudden silences. In every layer lies a story of survival. We read it in isotopes, but we feel it in awe. The same quality that makes ice a perfect preserver of molecules makes it a perfect preserver of mystery. It doesn't choose what to keep. It keeps everything. A fragment of feather, a sliver of wood, a droplet of seawater, even a hint of life itself. All of it waits, unchanged. Sometimes, what the ice returns to us feels almost like resurrection. In Siberia, entire animals have emerged from melting permafrost mammoths with their fur still intact, horses with their manes preserved, even wolves whose teeth gleam as though they were frozen yesterday. Their cells are damaged but recognizable, their DNA still legible enough to be read and replicated. The line between death and preservation blurs in the cold. Scientists have even found seeds buried for tens of thousands of years that could still germinate when warmed and watered, blooming into flowers unseen by human eyes. The ice does not kill what it takes, it merely slows it down until the right conditions return. And that is the essence of preservation, the suspension of change. Cold slows the dance of molecules, halting decay and protecting form. It's why we freeze our food, why we store tissues in cryogenic vaults, why deep space, with its near absolute zero, is thought to be the ultimate preserver of everything that ever drifts into it. Ice, whether on Earth or beyond it, is nature's pause button. It stops time not by defiance but by patience. What's remarkable is how far this patience extends. Beneath the Antarctic ice sheet, more than 4 kilometers down, lie entire lakes sealed off from the world above for millions of years. Lake Vostok is one of the largest, larger than some inland seas. Its water's liquid only because of the pressure above and the heat from Earth's core below. When scientists first drilled into it, they found microbial life simple, ancient, but alive. These organisms had survived in complete isolation, without sunlight, without exchange, in total stillness. They were not fossils or ghosts. They were the persistence of life in its purest form. The existence of those microbes changes how we think about preservation. It suggests that even in the harshest, most sealed environments, life does not merely endure. It continues to evolve, slowly and silently. Perhaps, beneath the ice, entire ecosystems exist that we have yet to imagine. If bacteria can survive millions of years in frozen darkness, what else might lie in the subglacial shadows? Structures of mineral or bone, records of previous climates, even traces of civilizations erased from the surface long ago. The ice could hold them all, perfectly intact, not fossilized but preserved. The difference matters. Fossils are impressions, memories pressed into stone. Preservation is continuation, the thing itself, unchanged, merely paused. It's conceivable that the artifacts of some earlier epoch, if they exist, might be hidden there still, neither destroyed nor visible, locked in stasis until the next great melt. We may not yet know how deep the archive goes. There's another kind of preservation that ice performs, though, one less tangible. It keeps silence. Sound does not travel far in cold air. It becomes muted, soft, almost reverent. In that quiet, even the smallest creak of the glacier feels monumental. This silence, too, is part of what makes the frozen world so different from the rest of Earth. It's not simply absence of noise, it's an amplification of stillness. The ice records not only the physical details of the past, but the emotional tone of it. Standing on a glacier, you can almost feel that tone vibrating through the ground, ancient, solemn, unhurried. The planet speaking in the language of patience. Sometimes, I wonder if the ice is also preserving us. Not our bodies or our cities, but our era, our presence. The layers forming right now above the poles will one day be the archives of our age. They will hold traces of our industrial breath, our fires, our smoke, our inventions. To future beings, human or otherwise, those layers will tell a story. That there was once a species that changed the air, warmed the world, and sent machines to the stars. The ice will not judge us for it. It will simply remember. What's humbling is how small we seem in comparison to that patience. The ice does not care whether we notice it, whether we read its layers or leave them untouched. It will continue its work long after we are gone, layering, compressing, sealing. It is not just the preserver of life, but the preserver of possibility. If Earth is ever to forget, it will be the ice that reminds it again. And when the ice finally melts, as it always does, it releases what it has kept. Air once breathed by forests, water once frozen in storms, creatures, plants, spores, secrets. Each melt is a return, a reintroduction of memory into motion. The preservation ends, and history becomes the present once more. What was sealed becomes story again. So perhaps the science of preservation is not only about studying what remains frozen, but understanding the quiet philosophy behind it. That survival is not about resistance, but about endurance. That stillness can be as powerful as movement, that what is hidden is not always lost. The ice teaches us this lesson over and over. It does not hurry, it does not fear time. It simply keeps what matters until the world is ready to see it again. Somewhere beneath the polar caps, in the deep blue quiet where no sunlight has ever reached, the past is waiting. Not gone, not destroyed, just preserved, resting in perfect patience. One day the thaw will come, and what sleeps there will open its eyes once more. Until then, the planet holds its breath, and the ice keeps watch, the keeper of all that ever was, and all that might still be. Chapter 9. Signals beneath the ice. If you stand on the endless white of Antarctica, it feels as though nothing could ever hide here. The light reflects in all directions, swallowing the horizon, and the world appears clean, untouched, pure. But purity is often an illusion. Beneath that surface, beneath miles of compacted time, there are shadows, shapes, and signals that whisper of hidden things. The ice may seem like silence made solid, but in truth, it hums. It carries echoes. The deeper you listen, the more you realize that this frozen continent is not empty at all. It is full of quiet motion, of memory, of buried messages waiting for someone patient enough to translate them. Scientists have long known that radar waves can travel through ice, reflecting off layers and surfaces deep below. What began as a way to study the movement of glaciers has become something far more mysterious. Over the last few decades, as technology has improved, researchers have begun to see things in the data they cannot easily explain. Underneath the ice sheets of both Greenland and Antarctica lie entire landscapes, mountain ranges, valleys, rivers, and lakes sealed away for millions of years. Some of these lakes are the size of small seas, isolated since the age of dinosaurs. Others are shallow pools, fed by meltwater and geothermal heat. Each one is a world unto itself, unseen and unmeasured. But then there are stranger signals. In certain places, radar and seismic readings show patterns that don't fit geological expectations. Lines too straight, angles too precise, reflections too uniform. Some appear circular, others grid-like, as though something once stood there and left its imprint before the ice moved in to erase it. The scientific explanations are careful, grounded, unusual rock formations, ice deformations, or the results of radar scattering. Yet even among the scientists who spend their lives studying this frozen frontier, there are moments of quiet wonder when the data suggests that the ice may be keeping secrets older than we can comprehend. Consider the case of Wilkes Land, deep within East Antarctica. Satellite gravity measurements have revealed a massive anomaly there, a circular depression buried beneath the ice, over 300 kilometers wide. Some believe it could be the remnant of an ancient asteroid impact, an event that may have altered the course of life on Earth. Others note its curious symmetry and depth, wondering if it might be something else, something not yet understood. The ice is too thick to drill, too vast to map completely. Whatever lies there has been sealed away for at least 200 million years, beyond the reach of both sunlight and speculation. Elsewhere, beneath the Greenland ice sheet, radar has detected what appears to be the outline of a vast basin, smooth-walled, geometrically distinct from the chaotic bedrock surrounding it. The discovery sparked excitement, then silence, as further studies struggle to confirm or deny its nature. The ice hides as much as it reveals. Each scan offers a glimpse, a fleeting signal before the data fades back into noise. It's as though the Earth itself is speaking through static, revealing just enough to keep us curious, never enough to give us certainty. And then there are the radio signals, those strange high-energy bursts detected by instruments designed to study cosmic rays. In 2018, researchers monitoring neutrino interactions over Antarctica picked up something unusual, signals rising from the ground instead of falling from space. The readings defied explanation. Cosmic rays, by their nature, should come from the cosmos, not from beneath the planet's surface. Yet there they were, bursts of energy emerging through the ice, faint but undeniable. Theories ranged from experimental error to exotic physics, to something older and more poetic. The idea that perhaps the ice itself was speaking, resonating with the faint hum of the universe, transmitting messages written in the language of frozen time. To stand on a glacier, if you listen carefully enough, is to hear this language. The ice moves in imperceptible ways, expanding, contracting, whispering as it fractures deep below. These movements produce infrasound vibrations too low for the human ear to detect, but powerful enough to be felt as pressure on the chest. It's the sound of a living landscape, though its motion is slower than any heartbeat. The Earth hums beneath the ice, and our instruments, however advanced, are only beginning to translate what it's saying. Sometimes, it isn't just instruments that sense these signals. Explorers and scientists who've spent long months on the ice often speak of strange sensations, compasses that drift without cause, shadows seen at the edge of vision, feelings of being followed across the barren white. They report dreams that seem shared among crews, dreams of deep blue caverns, of lights beneath the surface, of hearing voices carried by the wind that disappear when they wake. Such stories are easy to dismiss as the effects of isolation and monotony, but there's a pattern to them, echoing across decades. As though the ice, in its immense quiet, creates a space where human perception begins to stretch, where the line between the measurable and the imagined starts to blur. There's a certain poetry to the idea that the oldest messages on Earth are trapped in ice. Each flake that fell carried a signal, a trace of air, a spark of dust, the ghost of sunlight. Those signals built upon each other, layer after layer, until they became miles thick. When scientists drill an ice core, they are not just sampling frozen water, they are unrolling a tape recorder of the planet's past. Each trapped bubble of air carries a frequency, a tiny echo of the world as it once was. If you could somehow play back those layers, perhaps you'd hear not static but a symphony. The rise and fall of temperatures, the pulse of ancient storms, the quiet intervals between extinctions. And then there's the possibility that something older than the planets. The own rhythms could be preserved there, signals not from Earth, but from beyond it. Micrometeorites and cosmic dust fall through the atmosphere constantly, embedding themselves in glaciers. Each particle is a message from elsewhere, carrying isotopes and materials forged in stars long dead. The ice traps them the moment they land, keeping them unchanged for eons. When we melt these layers in laboratories, we release not only ancient air, but the whispers of other worlds. It's humbling to realize that the ice is not merely Earth's memory. It is a cosmic archive, a bridge between our small planet and the vast unknown beyond. Every so often, radar instruments pick up something that defies all ordinary explanation. A pulse too regular, a pattern too deliberate. The data is usually catalogued, discussed, and then filed away as an anomaly. Science requires caution, but quietly, among those who've spent lifetimes studying the polar regions, there's a shared acknowledgement. The ice is not done revealing its secrets. We are only scratching the surface of a story millions of years long, and beneath us, the signals continue to hum. When you think of it that way, the frozen continents feel less like wastelands, and more like libraries' vast, crystalline archives humming with messages we have not yet learned to hear. Maybe some of those messages are natural, the Earth's own record of its breathing. But maybe some were left there by hands we can't yet imagine, from civilizations erased by cold or by time. The distinction, in the end, may not matter. What matters is that the signals are there, steady and patient, waiting for the moment when the world is quiet enough to listen. Perhaps that is the greatest secret the ice keeps, that beneath its silence the Earth is still speaking. It speaks in tremors and radio waves, in patterns of refraction and shifts of density. It speaks in echoes that travel through the frozen layers and return distorted, as though answering our curiosity and riddles. We listen, we measure, we record, but deep down, what we're hearing is something older than science. The voice of the planet itself, humming softly through the dark, preserved in ice since before we learned to listen. And maybe, when the next great thaw comes, when the ice gives way and the hidden landscapes see light again, we'll finally understand what it's been trying to tell us all along. Until then, the signals continue, pulsing beneath the frozen stillness, a reminder that even silence on this ancient planet is never truly empty. Chapter 10: Antarctica's Hidden World. From above, Antarctica looks like the most featureless place on Earth. A vast white desert, stretching in all directions, silent and pure. But that stillness is deceiving. Beneath its frozen skin, this continent is one of the most dynamic, complex and secretive places on the planet. Beneath the ice sheet, which in some places is more than 4 kilometers thick, lies a hidden world that has been sealed away for millions of years. There are mountains and valleys, rivers that flow in total darkness, and lakes so ancient that they have never once seen the light of the sun. If you could melt the ice away in an instant, the landscape revealed would not look like a wasteland at all. It would look like another Earth, preserved in silence. The story of Antarctica's hidden world begins with the simplest of truths. Ice does not rest. Though it appears motionless from the surface, glaciers flow like slow rivers, carrying with them the memory of the sky, the dust of ancient worlds, and the weight of time itself. As the ice moves, it grinds against the land, sculpting mountains, carving valleys, and sealing away everything in its path. What lies beneath those miles of ice has been protected from weather, wind, and sunlight for so long that it may hold landscapes untouched since the age of the dinosaurs. This buried continent is not dead, it is simply waiting. Scientists first began to glimpse this hidden world through sound. Radar pulses, sent down through the ice, bounced back with strange echoes, patterns that revealed the contours of something unexpected. Beneath the central ice sheet lay an enormous mountain range, the Gamburtsev Mountains, stretching nearly as wide as the Alps. They are completely buried, invisible from above, yet as sharp and rugged as if they had been carved yesterday. How could mountains so tall and young-looking exist beneath a sheet of ice that has covered them for tens of millions of years? No one knows for certain. Some believe the mountains helped seed the formation of the ice itself, trapping snow and creating the conditions for the glaciers to spread. Others wonder if the relationship runs the other way, that the pressure and cold of the ice preserved the mountains in their prime, freezing time around them. Around these buried peaks lie vast basins filled with lakes and rivers. Lake Vostok is the largest, a body of water more than 250 kilometers long, sealed beneath nearly 4 kilometers of ice. It has been cut off from the surface for at least 15 million years, maybe longer. Its waters are under such immense pressure that they remain liquid despite the cold. The weight of the ice above prevents boiling, while heat from the Earth's core seeps upward, keeping the lake alive. When scientists drilled into the ice above Vostok, they found traces of microbial DNA living organisms that have endured in total isolation, feeding on minerals and the faint chemical energy of the deep. What kind of world exists down there? No sunlight, no seasons, no sky, only darkness and pressure. And yet, life finds a way. The microbes of Lake Vostok are not relics of the past, but residents of a present we cannot reach. They may have evolved along an entirely separate path, developing in conditions that mimic the frozen oceans of other planets and moons. Some scientists call them analogues for extraterrestrial life, proof that biology can thrive in places long thought sterile. Others suggest they might be even older than the ice that hides them, survivors from a time before Antarctica froze, adapting slowly as their world turned to darkness. But Lake Vostok is only one of more than 400 known subglacial lakes across the continent. They are connected by rivers that flow under the ice, forming a secret hydrological network that stretches for thousands of kilometers. These rivers run uphill and down, guided not by sunlight or gravity alone, but by pressure and heat. In some places, meltwater pools into hidden seas. In others, it drains into the ocean beneath ice shelves, creating vast caverns of liquid that support unique ecosystems. One of these, found beneath the Ross Ice Shelf, was recently explored by a small robotic probe. The footage it sent back showed what looked like a field of sediment, illuminated by the probe's soft lights. And within that field, tiny organisms moving slowly, gracefully, as though the darkness was their natural home. It's difficult to comprehend how large and alive this hidden world is. Beneath Antarctica there are valleys deeper than the Grand Canyon, mountain peaks as tall as the Rockies, and entire lakes that would swallow cities whole. It is a continent beneath a continent, shaped by a climate no one has ever seen. If all the ice were removed, Antarctica would not look barren. It would look like a strange, primeval paradise, one that belongs more to the deep past than to the present. Some researchers speculate that entire ancient ecosystems could be preserved there, locked away in the frozen sediments of those lakes. The layers of mud and mineral at the bottom of Lake Vostok, for instance, might hold pollen from extinct forests, remains of prehistoric microbes, or even complex life forms long vanished from the surface. The ice acts not just as a barrier, but as a vault, keeping time frozen and unspoiled. Every year, as drilling technology advances, we inch closer to opening that vault, but with caution. The fear of contamination runs deep. Introducing modern bacteria to an ecosystem that has existed in isolation for millions of years could destroy it before we even have a chance to understand it. And so, for now, much of Antarctica's hidden world remains untouched, its secrets safe within the dark. And then there are the anomalies, the things that defy neat explanation. Beneath certain regions, instruments have detected unusual magnetic readings, thermal hotspots, and shapes that do not fit with natural formations. In one area, near the edge of Wilkes Land, a vast circular depression lies buried deep beneath the ice, its symmetry uncanny. It could be the scar of an impact, or it could be something else entirely, an ancient structure perhaps, or the remnant of a geological event beyond our comprehension. The radar data hints at something massive and hollow, yet the ice refuses to let us see. It's easy to let imagination wander here. Perhaps, during one of the planet's long warm epochs, before Antarctica froze, civilizations flourished along its coasts. The land was lush then, filled with rivers and forests. When the cold came, they would have fled or built downward, following the heat of the earth into the deep caverns beneath. Could it be that remnants of their world still lie there, preserved beneath the ice, encased in layers of time thicker than any wall? Science remains cautious, but even caution can't suppress the wonder. Because what we've already found, the microbes, the mountains, the rivers, proves that Antarctica's story is not just one of cold and emptiness. It's a story of endurance, of life persisting where it should not. Standing on the surface, the wind cutting across the plain, you would never guess what lies beneath your feet. The snow crunches softly, the air is sharp, thin, and full of light. Everything seems open, infinite, but deep. Below, in the dark, the real Antarctica breathes. Its rivers still flow, its lakes ripple with unseen currents, its ancient mountains wait under their icy shrouds. In that sense, the continent is not frozen at all. It is merely dreaming, holding within it a memory of warmth, of green, of life. When the world warms again, as it always eventually does, the ice will retreat. It will reveal those hidden valleys, those lakes, those strange preserved shapes. The air will fill once more with the scent of thawing soil. What emerges may change how we understand life itself. Perhaps, in the melting, we will meet our own reflection, a reminder that even the coldest places are alive, and that the Earth's deepest secrets are never truly gone. They are only waiting for the light to find them again. Chapter 11. The Melt That Reveals. There is a moment, subtle but powerful, when ice begins to lose its certainty. It doesn't break with thunder or vanish all at once. It sighs. It softens. The long-held grip of frost loosens, and a world hidden for millennia begins to stir beneath the thaw. If you were standing on a glacier at the edge of this moment, you might not even notice at first. The surface would still gleam white under the sun, still crackle faintly underfoot, but somewhere deep below, the sound of water would begin a soft trickle through ancient tunnels, a whisper beneath the stillness. This is how revelation begins on Earth, not with an explosion, but with a melt. The great thaw has already begun. We often speak of it in the language of warning rising seas, collapsing shelves, storms and floods. And it is true, there is danger in the warmth. But beyond that fear lies another story, quieter and stranger. As the ice retreats, it reveals. Each year, new shapes emerge from the margins of glaciers. Forests that once stood tall, rivers long buried, bones of creatures that walked under forgotten suns. In Greenland, as the ice pulls back, dark soil appears where there was once only white. Scientists there recently uncovered ancient tundra beneath the melting surface, perfectly preserved. The soil still carried fragments of leaves and roots from nearly 1,000,000 years ago, a frozen snapshot of a world before the ice came. The discovery was like a whisper from the deep past, a reminder that what seems lost is often only sleeping. Antarctica too has begun to yield its edges. As coastal glaciers shrink, they expose rock formations unseen since the dawn of humanity. Beneath the ice shelves, satellite imaging has detected shifting patterns of sediment, traces of old rivers that may have flowed when the continent was still green. In some regions, meltwater has revealed entire landscapes, complete with valleys and ridges, as if the planet were exhaling slowly after holding its breath for an age. For scientists, this is both thrilling and heartbreaking. The ice that protects also conceals, and as it vanishes, the past opens itself to view, fragile and fleeting. Sometimes, what returns from the melt is not just land or water, but life. In the Siberian permafrost, long-buried organisms awaken as the temperature rises. Seeds, frozen for tens of thousands of years, have been coaxed back into bloom. Tiny worms, suspended in ice since before the age of writing, have wriggled back to motion when thawed. These are small resurrections, gentle miracles that blur the line between time and eternity. The ice, it seems, is not a tomb but a library, and now its books are opening. There is a haunting beauty in the idea that the earth remembers everything, and that the process of remembering is not an act of thinking, but of melting. When ice retreats, it releases not just water, but stories. Traces of ancient air rise into the modern sky, fragments of forgotten sunlight mix with our present winds. Each drop of meltwater is a message from another era, carrying within it the chemistry of its birth. Some of those messages are easy to read. The layers of trapped gases tell of past climates, of warm and cold cycles that have shaped our species. Others are more mysterious. Within some melting glaciers, scientists have found viruses frozen in isolation for tens of millennia, genetic codes that have never encountered the modern world. It is as though time itself, locked within the ice, is beginning to pour back into circulation. As the great melt accelerates, strange patterns appear across the planet's poles. In Antarctica, the surface of some glaciers darkens, not from pollution but from blooms of microscopic life. Algae, awakened by warmth, spread across the ice like watercolor stains, turning the white, blue and green, and even red. They are alive again after eons of silence, painting their way back into existence. The melt feeds them, and they in turn feed the melt, absorbing sunlight, hastening the thaw. Life and loss become entwined, each one birthing the other. What makes this age of melting so profound is that it is revealing not only the past, but the hidden architecture of the Earth itself. Under the Greenland ice sheet, as layers thin, satellites have detected the outlines of entire river systems that once carried meltwater from glaciers that no longer exist. They show us that the land beneath the ice has always been dynamic, carved by ancient floods and frozen again in new forms. These rivers are long gone, but in the faint marks they left behind, we see echoes of movement that shaped the planet long before us. And as the ice recedes, the landscape changes once more. New rivers form, where old ones ended, flowing over ground that hasn't felt water in a million years. The earth, in its slow rhythm, is beginning to move again. To many, the melt feels like loss. It is the disappearance of the old order, the glittering white expanses that once seemed eternal. But on another scale, a deeper one, it is renewal. The planet is remembering how to breathe. Glaciers advance and retreat as part of an ancient pattern. They sculpt the land, then withdraw, allowing life to bloom in their wake. The melt is simply the next step in that dance. Yes, it brings danger, but it also brings revelation. Every thaw is a story resurfacing, every drop of water a page turned. Imagine the final moments of a glacier that has stood for 100,000 years. Beneath it lie forests, rivers, perhaps even the remnants of early human settlements, their tools and bones preserved in the deep freeze. As the ice softens and slides away, sunlight touches those shapes again. The world's oldest wood glistens in the light. Air from the last ice age escapes in a hiss. If there were someone there to watch, they would witness time unfolding in reverse, a kind of quiet rebirth. The glacier's retreat is not destruction, it is revelation, the earth unwrapping itself layer by layer. There is something deeply human about this moment. We too carry our own frozen histories, memories buried beneath layers of time and silence. When warmth returns to them, they rise to the surface, fragile and glowing. The planet is doing what we all do when we begin to thaw, remembering, releasing, forgiving. The melt is both a mourning and a meditation. It reminds us that everything hidden will one day be seen again, not as it was, but transformed by the passage of ages. And perhaps, hidden within this slow unveiling, there are still greater revelations to come. What if, beneath the glaciers of Antarctica or Greenland, there lie traces of civilizations that lived during a long-forgotten interglacial age, people or beings who watched their world freeze around them and disappeared into legend? The ice would have kept them safe, preserving their tools, their art, their stories in perfect stasis. If such remnants exist, the melt will one day uncover them. The first signs might be subtle, a line too straight to be natural, a fragment of material untouched by erosion. When that happens, we will be forced to reconsider what float. We know about time, about history, about our place in the great cycles of Earth. But even if what emerges is only rock and soil, the message remains the same. The Earth forgets nothing. Its memory is written not in ink but in water, frozen and thawed again over billions of years. Each melt is a reminder that nothing truly vanishes. It only waits to be revealed. The glaciers that retreat today are not dying, they are speaking, releasing the voices they have carried for lifetimes. As night falls over a melting ice field, the water glows faintly under the aurora. The sound of dripping becomes a kind of music, slow, deliberate, eternal. In that rhythm, you can hear both endings and beginnings. The ice, for all its grandeur, was never meant to last forever. Its purpose was to preserve, to hold, to wait until the moment of return, and now that moment is arriving. The melt that reveals is the planet's soft confession, the way Earth remembers what it once was and dares to show it again. Perhaps that is what beauty really means on a planetary scale, not perfection or permanence, but the willingness to be seen, even as we change. The glaciers melt, the rivers flow, and the hidden world beneath begins to breathe again. And somewhere in that breath, in that quiet unfolding of the old into the new, the planet is whispering to us the oldest truth of all, that nothing is ever truly lost, only waiting beneath the surface, patient as ice, ready to be found. Chapter 12. The Archaeology of the Impossible. When we think of archaeology, we picture sunlight and dust, trowels scraping at desert sand, the slow uncovering of ancient stones under a blazing sky. But what happens when the past isn't buried beneath heat and sand, but frozen beneath ice? What happens when time itself has been compressed into crystal, when the clues of lost civilizations are sealed under glaciers thicker than mountains? This is the realm of impossible archaeology, the search for traces of worlds that the Earth has hidden too well, buried not in the soil but in its frozen memory. For generations, the idea that anything human or even pre-human could lie beneath the polar ice was considered fantasy. The cold was too absolute, the ice too ancient, the landscape too inhospitable for anything so fragile as civilization to have once lived there. But the longer we study the planet's rhythms, the less certain that assumption becomes. We know now that Antarctica was not always the world's coldest continent. Millions of years ago it was covered in forests, its shores lined with rivers and ferns. Fossils of leaves, pollen, and even amphibians tell us that life flourished there before the Great Freeze. So, if the Earth was once warm enough for trees to grow at the South Pole, then perhaps it was warm enough for something more, something that built, that thought, that remembered. In recent decades, our instruments have begun to pick up strange hints from beneath the ice patterns that seem geometric, alignments that suggest intention. Radar scans have revealed ridges that meet at perfect right angles, plateaus that echo the symmetry of architecture rather than geology. The official explanations are cautious. Fault lines, natural ice formations, the echoes of buried mountains. And yet, the symmetry lingers in the data, too precise to ignore. It's not proof of anything. Not yet, but it's enough to make the imagination move. Because sometimes, the first step toward discovery isn't evidence. It's curiosity that refuses to go quiet. The archaeology of the impossible begins with questions like these. What if civilization is not a single linear story, but a cycle, a pulse that rises and falls with the planet's own breath? If Earth has frozen and thawed dozens of times, if continents have shifted and oceans have drowned coastlines, then perhaps entire chapters of human or pre-human history have been erased, layer by layer, crushed beneath the slow weight of time. The ice, in that sense, is not a graveyard but a vault. It hides, preserves, and transforms. And what it holds may one day redefine what we think we know about where we come from. There are already precedents, small but astonishing. In the high Alps, melting glaciers have begun to return what they borrowed long ago. The body of Ötzi the Iceman, for example, emerged from a melting patch of ice in 1991, perfectly preserved after more than 5,000 years. His clothes, his tools, even the contents of his stomach were intact. He was a messenger from a time before written history, his existence reminding us that the ice keeps its promises. And if one man could remain so whole beneath a few meters of snow, what might remain under kilometers of ice, sealed for millennia? The permafrost of Siberia has already given us glimpses of this deeper archaeology. Along with mammoths and prehistoric wolves, researchers have found ancient artifacts, stone tools, carvings, fragments of woven fibers that predate known cultures. Some are so well preserved that they defy their age, their edges sharp, their surfaces untouched by decay. It's as if the ice itself decided to keep them, to save them for later. These discoveries remind us that the Earth is not static. It hides its past, then returns it when the time is right, when the balance shifts from silence to revelation. But the archaeology of the impossible also deals in absence in the spaces where something should be but isn't. Beneath the glaciers, our radar sees shapes but no textures, patterns but no explanations. It's as though the ice is showing us outlines without context, like a memory half recalled. There are circular depressions beneath Antarctica's Wilkes Land that could be the scars of impacts or the remnants of something built and then buried by catastrophe. There are unexplained anomalies in the gravitational data, areas where mass seems to be missing as though great voids lie under the ice. Even the magnetic field above Antarctica behaves strangely, fluctuating in ways we don't fully understand. It could be geology, it could be something else. The truth remains suspended in the cold, waiting for us to earn it. And then there is the human imagination, restless and unsatisfied with silence. The idea that civilizations may have risen and fallen before us is not new. Plato wrote of Atlantis, an island civilization advanced and proud, lost to the sea in a single day and night of misfortune. Across the world, myths echo similar themes: lands swallowed by water, kingdoms buried by snow, people who disappeared into the mountains when the sky turned cold. These stories are often dismissed as metaphors for change or moral decay, but what if they are faint recollections of real events, passed down through the fog of time? If humans, or their precursors, once walked lands that now lie beneath the polar caps, then perhaps their voices survive not in stone tablets but in stories that outlived them. Science, for all its rigour, often begins in wonder. The archaeologist staring at an impossible signal under the ice is not so different from the poet staring at the stars. Both are trying to interpret patterns, to read meaning in what appears distant and mute, and the ice, in its vast silence, gives little away. Every attempt to penetrate its depths is an act of patience. Drilling into Antarctic ice can take decades. One wrong move, one trace of contamination, and the entire sample is lost. The deeper we go, the more fragile the secrets become. The archaeology of the impossible is a dialogue between curiosity and caution, between the desire to know and the humility to wait. Yet we are already learning that the ice itself is not as uniform as it appears. Beneath the thickest glaciers, radar images show void spaces large enough to hold cities. Some are natural caverns carved by geothermal heat. Others are unexplained hollows that seem to resist mapping. What fills those spaces is still unknown. Some may contain liquid lakes, others may be empty pockets of air older than humanity. But each one is a reminder that the planet's surface is only a fraction of its story. Beneath us, entire worlds lie hidden, as though the Earth has been quietly keeping its own museum untouched by the passage of time. And perhaps, one day, when the melt deepens and the patience of the ice runs out, we will see what lies within. It may be nothing more than stone and sediment, proof of nature's quiet artistry. Or it may be something that shifts the balance of history, a tool where none should exist, a carving that speaks of hands too ancient to belong to us. When that day comes, archaeology will no longer be confined to deserts and ruins. It will extend into the frozen heart of the planet, into the impossible depths where memory itself has taken root. Standing on the edge of a glacier, with wind howling and light reflecting off the white horizon, it's hard to imagine that anything could survive beneath such weight. But the planet is older than imagination, and its patience is infinite. Somewhere under our feet, beneath the coldest layers of ice, the impossible waits not to be discovered in haste, but to be revealed in its own time. The archaeology of the impossible is not about digging, it is about listening. It is about recognizing that the world beneath the ice is not gone, it is only holding its breath. Perhaps the answers we seek about our origins, about the cycles of life and civilization, are not in the stars above, but in the frozen depths below. The ice has seen everything. The first rains, the first fires, the rise and fall of oceans, and maybe even the rise and fall of minds like ours. And when the time comes for the Earth to thaw again, when the glaciers retreat and the ancient vaults open, the impossible will no longer be a question. It will be history, rediscovered beneath the slow, patient heartbeat of the planet. Chapter 13. Time as a glacier. There is something deeply comforting about the way glaciers move. They are not in a hurry. They take their time, centuries, even millennia, to cross a valley or swallow a mountain. You can stand upon one, listening to the faint groans and cracks beneath your boots, and feel that you are standing not on a landscape but on a clock. The ice does not measure seconds or minutes. It measures patience. To watch a glacier move is to glimpse time itself in motion, slow, deliberate, unstoppable. If we could see time the way the Earth feels it, we might find it looks very much like a glacier. It advances and retreats, carving everything it touches, smoothing the rough edges of the world. It doesn't rush to erase or to reveal. It simply persists. Every layer of snow that falls on a glacier becomes a record of the moment it landed. Over centuries, those layers compress into ice, pressing history into crystal. The deeper you go, the older the memory. It's not so different from how we remember. Every experience, every joy or loss, becomes a layer, softened and compacted by the weight of years. And just like a glacier, we carry all of it within us, even when we seem still on the surface. Time, like ice, preserves as much as it erases. A glacier can grind down a mountain until it's no more than a valley of sand, yet within that sand are traces of everything that once stood tall. The past doesn't vanish. It's transformed. When the ice finally melts, the land it leaves behind is fertile, the soil rich with minerals born from the crush of ages. What once seemed destructive turns out to be renewal. Time works the same way. It reshapes us through pressure, loss, and change, but what it leaves behind is fertile ground for whatever comes next. When scientists drill deep into the polar ice, they aren't just studying weather, they are reading the diary of the planet. Each layer of ice is a sentence, a breath, a frozen whisper of a particular age. Through those layers, we can trace the rise and fall of atmospheres, the pulse of volcanoes, the chemical signatures of extinction and rebirth. The glacier keeps perfect records of all the world's seasons, the hot and the cold, the tranquil and the violent. If time is a glacier, then the Earth's story is written in its depths, an unbroken script stretching backward into silence. But there's a gentler lesson too, that time does not rush to its destination. To the glacier, there is no destination, only movement. It flows toward the sea because that is what gravity and temperature demand, but it has no urgency about it. It doesn't care when it arrives. In that way, glaciers are teachers of a kind of patience we've forgotten. We live in seconds, in flashes, in restless pursuits. The ice moves at the pace of the planet's heartbeat. It is old enough to remember forests that once grew at the poles and young enough to be shaping rivers that our descendants will one day drink from. It moves through eras as we move through days. If we were to slow our own perception to the pace of a glacier, perhaps we would see time differently. We might understand that change doesn't happen in leaps, but in layers. A civilization doesn't fall overnight. It erodes, softens, reforms. A species doesn't vanish all at once. It adapts until it can no longer, then passes its essence into something new. Even thoughts, our own small ideas, shift that way, changing imperceptibly until they are something entirely different, yet somehow still the same. Everything in existence, from ice to consciousness, obeys the same quiet rhythm. The poet in me can't help but think that glaciers are the Earth's way of remembering itself. They keep the cold moments tucked away so the warmth has something to return to. They store the air of lost summers, the dust of vanished winds. If you could listen to a glacier melting, you would hear the sigh of ancient weather finding its voice again. The water that runs from those melting edges is not just water. It is time turned liquid, time released from its long sleep. When it trickles into the sea, it joins the living world once more, carrying with it everything it has witnessed. And what it has witnessed is beyond comprehension. It has seen continents drift like slow ships across the mantle of the planet. It has watched forests rise and burn and rise again. It has held within it the air of worlds before ours, the breath of creatures no one has ever seen, the ash of stars that died before Earth took form. A glacier is not just ice, it is a memory older than language. And like all memories, it changes as it moves, blending what was with what is, blurring the boundaries between past and present, until they become one. When we talk about the passage of time, we often imagine it as something that leaves us behind, something linear and merciless. But the glacier shows us a different truth. Time doesn't abandon what it has touched. It carries it forward, reshaped but still present. The rock ground to sand is still the mountain, only gentler. The ice melted into water is still the snow, only freer. The same applies to us. Every stage of life is contained in the next, transformed but not lost. In that sense, we are all glaciers in miniature layers upon layers of experience, compacted into being, slowly flowing toward the future. There's a certain comfort in imagining time this way, not as a thief, but as an artist. It chisels and refines, using patience as its tool. The rough edges of existence are worn smooth by its passage. It doesn't rush to finish the sculpture. It knows the beauty lies in the slow unfolding. To live, then, is to be part of that art, to be shaped by pressures we don't always understand, to melt and reform, to carry forward what came before us in some new, softened form. Even now, as the glaciers retreat, they are not ending. They are transforming again, becoming rivers and lakes, seeding, clouds that will fall as snow once more. The cycle continues, as it always has. The ice that melts today will someday be the glacier of tomorrow, just as the time we live now will one day be folded into the memory of something greater. Nothing in the natural world is truly lost, it only changes shape. If time is a glacier, then every one of us lives within its flow, carried without knowing it, shaped by forces too vast to name. We can fight it, or we can learn from it. The glacier teaches us that movement need not be fast to be powerful, that stillness can hold entire worlds, and that endurance is its own kind of grace. It teaches us that everything has its season of being frozen and its season of melting. Neither is permanent, and neither is wrong. Both are necessary to the rhythm of becoming. So when you next imagine the passage of time, think not of clocks or calendars, but of ice, ancient, luminous, patient. Think of how it holds the past within it while still flowing toward the future. Think of how it shapes without haste and remembers without bitterness. That is time, not as we measure it, but as the earth feels it, vast, unhurried, and endlessly kind. Perhaps, in the quietest parts of ourselves, we are trying to do what the glaciers do, to carry our histories without letting them crush us, to move forward without forgetting where we've been. The glacier does not mourn the mountain it came from. It carries its essence forward, reshaping it into rivers and valleys, into life. In that, it becomes a lesson not only in patience but in forgiveness. And so, when you walk upon the ice or watch it melt into sea, remember, you are watching time itself exhale. You are witnessing the Earth's memory made visible. The glacier flows, the past moves within it, and the future waits just beyond its edge. Time is not passing us by. It is carrying us along slowly, silently, beautifully toward whatever comes next. Chapter 14. The Age of Reawakening. There are moments in Earth's long story when everything that slept begins to stir again. The ice loosens, the air softens, and something ancient, half-forgotten, breathes for the first time in ages. It is as if the planet itself stretches after a long dream, its frozen joints creaking back to motion. This is the age of reawakening, the slow, inevitable return of warmth, of motion, of sound. It comes not as a rush or a storm, but as a sigh. You might miss it if you didn't know what to listen for. The faint drip of water, the subtle shift of light, the first threads of green threading their way through soil that has not felt life in centuries. The world has experienced this countless times before. Every ice age ends not with a single sunrise, but with the patient, persistent rhythm of change. The great sheets of ice, miles thick, begin to retreat, their edges dissolving into rivers that carve new paths across continents. Oceans swell, winds shift, the air grows heavy with mist and pollen. It is a rebirth that happens so slowly that no single generation could ever truly witness it. Yet over thousands of years, the transformation becomes complete. The white quiet gives way to colour, to warmth, to sound. Forests reclaim valleys, birds return, the air hums again. In the last great thaw, some 12,000 years ago, this same miracle unfolded. The glaciers that had swallowed half the planet began to withdraw, revealing lands untouched since the age of mammoths. Rivers found new courses, mountains emerged from their icy prisons, and the world began to breathe again. It was during this reawakening that humanity, still fragile and scattered, took its first confident steps toward civilization. The warmth gave us abundance, and abundance gave us time to wonder. We began to plant, to build, to dream. The Earth's reawakening was mirrored in our own, and perhaps it is happening again. The ice is melting once more, faster this time, more chaotically. To many, it feels like loss, the collapse of balance, the end of stability. But from another angle, a slower, deeper one, it may be seen as part of that same rhythm, the Earth's slow exhale after another long inhale of frost. This does not erase the danger or the grief, but it reminds us that even endings are part of continuance. The planet has frozen and thawed 100 times before, and each thaw has brought renewal, though it comes at a cost. The age of reawakening is not gentle, it reshapes everything, even us. When the glaciers retreat, they do more than reveal land. They reveal time. Beneath the ice are fossils, forests, rivers, and sometimes the traces of lives that existed long before ours. With every thaw, the past returns not as memory but as reality. The Earth reopens its archives. Creatures preserved in permafrost emerge as if they were only sleeping. Bacteria and seeds that have not seen the sun for tens of thousands of years awaken when touched by warmth. Even air itself, trapped in ancient bubbles, escapes back into the sky carrying the breath of extinct worlds. The reawakening is not only about the living, it is also about the return of everything that was ever alive, coming back in new forms, whispering through the present. There is something profoundly humbling about this. We often think of history as something linear, as if time moves only forward, but the reawakening shows us that time is circular, or perhaps spiral. What is lost returns, altered but recognizable. The forest that grows after the melt carries the same species that stood there before, their seeds waiting in the frozen soil. The water that flows from the melting glacier may once have been a river that nourished a completely different world. The past does not die, it waits. And the earth, when it warms, remembers. The reawakening also brings strangeness. As ice vanishes, new landscapes emerge, but they are not always what we expect. In Greenland and Antarctica, the ice has preserved mountains, valleys, and entire ecosystems sealed away for millions of years. When those are finally freed, they may release more than just water. They may reveal forms of life we have never encountered, microorganisms evolved in isolation, carrying the genetic echoes of eras before humanity. To us, they will seem alien, but in truth they will be the oldest citizens of this planet, returning to a world that long forgot them. It is easy to forget that this process is still unfolding. The Earth is not done waking up. Every spring, in every thawing tundra and every softening glacier, the cycle continues. Rivers rush where once there was silence. The soil exhales the scent of renewal. The air fills with migrating birds, their patterns guided by instincts older than memory. Even the oceans feel it, the pulse of warmer currents stirring plankton blooms that feed the foundation of life. The age of reawakening is not just an event, it is an ongoing heartbeat, a reminder that the planet never truly sleeps. But with this awakening comes uncertainty. For humans, the re-emergence of the old world is both a wonder and a warning. The same melting that reveals lost valleys also exposes ancient carbon, releasing it into the air. The same thaw that awakens seeds also stirs long-dormant pathogens, viruses that the world has not encountered for tens of thousands of years. The Earth, in remembering itself, does not discriminate between what was harmless and what was dangerous. It simply returns everything, without judgment. We are part of that return now, both observers and participants in the planet's slow unfreezing. Sometimes I wonder if the Earth feels this reawakening the way we feel the return of memory. When something long buried surfaces within us, a smell, a song, a dream, we are startled by both its familiarity and its distance. The Earth too must feel that. As it melts, it recalls itself the forests it once held, the creatures that once roamed its plains, the warmth it once carried before the paré. Cold took over. Perhaps the wind carries that nostalgia, that longing for its own youth. The age of reawakening is not just the renewal of life, but the renewal of memory, a reintroduction between the world and its own reflection. And yet, beneath all the danger, there is beauty. In every droplet of meltwater there is the story of survival. The ice that melts today once fell as snow in another epoch, under a different sky. It has journeyed through ages, compressed, frozen, and now freed again. That water will flow into rivers, into oceans, into clouds, and someday, perhaps, back into ice. There is no true end to its path, only transformation. That is what reawakening means, not resurrection, but motion. The Earth has always known how to heal, though its healing does not always look kind. Fire follows frost, floods follow drought. Creation and destruction are partners, each making way for the other. We exist in one of those turning points now, watching the slow unraveling of one age and the trembling birth of another. It feels chaotic, even apocalyptic at times, but to the planet, it is simply the continuation of its breathing. The age of reawakening is not an ending, it is an inhale. If we listen closely, we can hear it. The slow trickle of ice becoming river, the creak of thawing wood, the distant rumble of glaciers moving like slow thunder. The Earth is speaking again, not in words, but in warmth. It is saying, I am still here, I have always been here, I am waking up. And as it wakes, it invites us to do the same, to remember, to adapt, to become part of the living rhythm again. We are children of this reawakening. Our bones carry the minerals of melted glaciers. Our breath carries the same air once trapped in ice. We are made of the thaw, the ancient returning into the present. And perhaps, in some distant future, when the planet cools once more and another age of ice begins, we too will become part of what the Earth remembers. The cycle will continue, patient and eternal. For now, though, in this brief moment of warmth, we are witnesses to the reawakening, a chapter in the planet's endless story, written not in fire or stone, but in melting ice and quiet water. Chapter 15. The Voices of the Melt. If you listen carefully, you can hear the ice speaking. It doesn't use words or sounds we're used to. It speaks in tones that live below hearing, in vibrations that travel through rock and water and bone. To most, the glaciers seem silent, but to those who spend enough time among them, the truth becomes clear. Silence is only an illusion. Beneath the white stillness, there are voices, cracks, groans, whispers of pressure shifting deep within. Each sound is a syllable in a language as old as the Earth itself, the language of transformation. When a glacier melts, It doesn't just vanish, it sings its own undoing. The surface fractures, sending ripples of sound through the valley. Streams form where cracks deepen, and as they flow, they carry that voice forward, echoing down mountainsides and into the sea. Scientists who study these sounds call them cryospheric music, the harmonies of Thor. Every glacier has its own tone, determined by density, temperature, and age. Some hum like distant thunder, others crack like breaking glass. Together, they form a planetary chorus, the Earth speaking softly as it changes shape. But the voices of the melt are not confined to sound alone. They are in motion, in colour, in scent. The air above a melting glacier smells different mineral, electric, as though the breath of ancient stone were mixing with the present moment. The meltwater itself has a clarity unlike any other. When you cup it in your hand, you are holding time snow that fell 10,000 years ago, now freed into the present. That release is its own kind of voice, the softest declaration imaginable. I am still here. I have returned. In the deep polar regions where the sun lingers low on the horizon, the Repidins, melting ice creates rivers that glow blue beneath the light. From above, they look like veins spreading across the skin of the planet, carrying life back into motion. The ice feeds the sea feeds the sky, and the sky returns its gift as rain. This is the voice of renewal, spoken not through words but through cycles. The melt is the Earth's way of remembering itself aloud, a gentle confession of impermanence. Yet, there are other quieter voices too, voices that have been waiting inside the ice for far longer than we can comprehend. When ancient permafrost thaws, it exhales air that hasn't touched the modern atmosphere since before our species existed. Each bubble that bursts is a breath from another age, rising from darkness into sunlight. Within that air are traces of forgotten forests, extinct animals, and climates we can only imagine. Some of the gases are harmless, others carry the ghosts of change, carbon, methane, the elements of warming. These are not malicious presences, but they are reminders. The Earth never forgets. What we release back into the world is what it has always contained, waiting for the moment of return. And then, in even rarer moments, the voices of the melt become literal. Within the thawing permafrost, tiny organisms awaken bacteria and microbes that have been suspended for tens of thousands of years. They begin to move, to feed, to reproduce. Life, once frozen, begins to speak again. Some of these organisms are familiar, cousins of species still alive today. Others are utterly alien, born of conditions that no longer exist. They are the oldest voices of all, speaking in the language of existence itself, the quiet pulse of being alive. There's a strange beauty in the idea that the planet's most ancient voices return when the ice melts. It's as though the Earth has been keeping its memories in safekeeping, protecting them from erosion, from decay, from time. Now, as the warmth spreads, it releases them not as warnings, but as reminders. The past and the present are not separate. They are two tones in the same song. The glacier hums in one key, the river in another, and together they create harmony. To listen to the melt is to hear the world remembering how to be whole. And yet, not all of the voices are kind. There are cries in the melt too, sounds of collapse, of strain. When great ice shelves break apart, the noise they make is unlike anything else on Earth. It's a deep, resonant thunder that travels for miles, echoing through the sea. Those moments are both magnificent and terrifying, the sound of power meeting impermanence. To witness it is to stand at the edge of two worlds, the frozen and the fluid, and feel the weight of transition pressing against your chest. It is the sound of change, unstoppable and final. Sometimes, explorers report hearing what they call phantom sounds on the ice. These are tones that come and go, with no apparent source, low hums, distant bells, or soft choruses that seem to move with the wind. Some say it's the resonance of ice sheets shifting. Others call it imagination, the mind translating the silence into meaning. But maybe there's truth in both. The human brain is tuned to seek pattern, to find music in chaos. Perhaps what we hear in those moments is the echo of our own existence reflected back at us, the recognition that we too are melting, changing, part of the same vast transformation. If you were to stand alone at the edge of a melting glacier, you might feel that recognition in your bones. The world would be quiet except for the drip of water and the faint hiss of air escaping from the cracks. You might close your eyes and feel the vibration underfoot, the ancient heartbeat of the ice fading as it becomes river again. In that moment, you are listening not just to the earth, but to yourself. The boundary between what is outside and what is within begins to dissolve. The glacier melts, and so do you, your edges, softening, your certainties washing away. Perhaps that is what the voices of the melt are truly saying, that nothing is ever gone, only transformed. The mountain becomes the valley, the glacier becomes the river, the frozen breath becomes the wind again. Even loss is a form of continuation, a change in tone rather than an ending. The earth's voice is not a single melody, it is a symphony of transitions. Every drop that falls, every crack that echoes, is part of that vast composition. We too are notes within it, fleeting and essential, all at once. To listen to the melt is to understand the fragility of permanence. The same ice that has stood for millennia can disappear in a season, and yet, what it leaves behind is not absence but space, space for something new to grow, to breathe, to sing. The rivers born from the glaciers carry minerals that feed the oceans, giving rise to blooms of life. The ice that vanishes returns as rain. Every end feeds a beginning. And maybe, if we're quiet enough, we can learn to join that chorus. We can learn to listen, not with fear, but with reverence. The voices of the melt are not mourning, they are storytelling. They are the sound of the earth narrating its own transformation, a slow and endless saga of water and memory. As night falls over the ice, the sounds fade into a soft hum. The glacier's song continues, even in darkness. Somewhere, deep within, a drop of water forms, hesitates, and falls. That single note travels through layers of ancient ice, through rock, through air, until it reaches the sea. Its journey is endless, its message simple. All things flow. The voices of the melt are eternal, because the cycle is eternal. And in their song, if we listen closely enough, we might just hear the reflection of our own fleeting voices, brief, bright, and part of something far greater than ourselves. Chapter 16. Beneath the last ice. There will come a time when the last glacier stands alone. It won't vanish suddenly, and it won't scream. It will simply stand there, as it has always done, while the world around it softens. The air will hum with warmth, the seas will stretch farther inland, and the mountain that once carried the glacier will feel light for the first time in an age. Beneath that last mass of ice, deep in the rock and pressure, something will still be alive, something patient, waiting, enduring as it always has. Because beneath the last ice, the story doesn't end. It begins again. If we could descend into the belly of that glacier, we would find a world that feels more like memory than matter. The ice itself would glow faintly, lit by the refracted blue of sunlight filtering through kilometers of crystal. It would groan and sigh as it shifted, ancient air moving in slow, rhythmic waves. Beneath it, the earth would pulse faintly with geothermal heat, a reminder that even in the deepest cold, the planet's heart never stops burning. The water there would be pure enough to outlast time itself, untouched by pollution or sky, filled with tiny organisms drifting in suspension, descendants of microbes that survived every extinction, every freeze, every thaw. It is strange to think that life might continue beneath ice long after it disappears from the surface. Yet that is how Earth endures, not through dominance, but through persistence. When the great glaciers of the past retreated, the meltwaters carved new rivers, but not all the water escaped. Some remained trapped below, forming secret reservoirs and buried lakes that still exist today. Beneath Antarctica alone lie hundreds of these hidden worlds, their waters dark and silent, sealed off for millions of years. Even now they live unseen, quietly shaping the foundation of the continent above. When the surface finally melts away, they will remain for a while longer, guardians of a colder age. To imagine what lies beneath the last ice is to imagine the planet remembering its oldest dreams. The pressure would be immense, thousands of tons per square meter. And yet, within that weight, life would go on. Tiny bacterial colonies would cling to mineral surfaces, feeding on the faint chemical warmth rising from the Earth's crust. In the still water, chemical reactions would unfold slowly, gracefully, like ancient rituals. Each microbe would carry within it the inheritance of billions of years, the unbroken chain that began when the first cell formed in the ocean. They would not know that the world above had changed. They would not care. Survival would be enough, and perhaps, in that last pocket of ice, other things might endure too. Structures, remnants, the quiet echoes of a civilization that once looked at glaciers and saw permanence. Imagine an observatory buried by snow long ago, its instruments frozen mid-measurement, its lights extinguished. When the ice melted, those relics might emerge like fossils, fragile but unbroken. If anyone were there to see them, they might not recognize what they were at first. The ice would have polished them, made them smooth and strange. The marks of hands, of tools, of thought, would still linger beneath the frost. It is not impossible that long after we are gone, our memories, our stories, our ruins will still lie beneath the last ice, waiting to be found. In some ways, that is how the planet keeps its continuity. The ice has always been its archivist. It preserves, it forgets nothing. Beneath every glacier lies a library of eras, trapped gases, ancient soils, pollen from vanished forests, the bones of animals whose names are now only syllables in science. Each layer is a page, pressed under the weight of time. If one could peel back those layers, one could read the full autobiography of Earth, the fire, the flood, the quiet in between. The last ice will hold the final chapter, and when it melts, it will release that story back into the world. What would it feel like to stand beside that last glacier, knowing it was the final remnant of an age? The air would be heavy with warmth, and yet there would still be a chill that clings to memory. The ice itself might hum faintly, as though aware of its solitude. You could touch its surface and feel the compression of centuries beneath your palm, the cold weight of everything that once was. And as the water ran from its base, you would be touching the oldest blood of the planet, the distilled essence of time. It would taste faintly of minerals and silence. It would be the closest thing to eternity that still lives on Earth. There is a certain sadness in imagining that moment, but there is beauty too, because the melting of the last ice would not be an ending so much as a return. The water released from it would feed rivers, oceans, clouds. It would join the hydrological cycle once again, rising as vapor, falling as rain, freezing again in high places. The last ice would not die. It would dissolve back into motion, into life. Perhaps, in some far future age, when the world cools once more, that same water will fall again as snow, layer upon layer, until a new glacier begins to form. The Earth, after all, never truly forgets how to be cold. It only rests between breaths. And beneath that rest, in the deepest silence, something always remains. The microbial life beneath the ice is not just an echo of the past, it is the blueprint for what comes next. It teaches us that life requires no sunlight, no warmth, only persistence. The same principle applies to civilizations, to species, to memory. What survives is not always what is strongest, but what is willing to endure the long dark until the light returns. The last ice will carry that lesson within it, frozen into its crystalline veins. There is an ancient philosophy, whispered among early cultures, that says the earth has a soul, that it sleeps and wakes, breathes and dreams. If that is true, then the ice is its dream. In its frozen form, the planet rests, storing energy, waiting for the moment to rise again. Beneath the last glacier, that dream would still be alive, quiet and unbroken. It would hum through the rock, through the water, through the molecules that will one day rejoin the sea. The dream of ice is not about stillness, it is about patience, about remembering that every silence contains movement waiting to be born. When we think of the end of the ice, we often imagine loss, the vanishing of purity, the disappearance of beauty. But perhaps we are mistaken. Perhaps the last glacier is not a symbol of death, but of continuity. It is the vessel through which the earth carries its memory forward, from one age to the next. When it melts, that memory does not fade. It spreads. It becomes rain on mountains, mist in valleys, tears on human faces. It becomes the ocean that reflects the sky. It becomes the cycle renewed. So, beneath the last ice, life waits. Not in despair, but in faith. Faith in time, in rhythm, in return. The glacier does not resist its melting. It fulfills its purpose by letting go. And in doing so, it reminds us of our own impermanence, our own place within the vastness of Earth's memory. Someday, long after the last glacier has flowed into the sea, the traces of its passage will still be there in rivers, in fossils, in the air we breathe. And perhaps, in the echoes of our descendants' voices, there will still be the faint memory of ice, carried like a song that never quite fades. The last glacier will melt, and the world will change again. But somewhere, deep beneath the rock, beneath the frozen soil and the quiet water, life will persist. The earth will remember. And when the cycle turns once more, when the warmth gives way to cold, and snow begins to fall again, it will build a new glacier upon the bones of the old, a monument to the endurance of time. Beneath that new ice, the whispers of the past will rest once more, waiting for the next awakening. And so the story continues, endless, graceful, and patient as the cold itself. Chapter 17. The Memory of Water. All things that have ever lived on this planet owe something to water. It is the softest and the strongest of all things, capable of nurturing life or eroding mountains, of reflecting the sky or swallowing whole continents. Yet water, unlike stone or fire, has no fixed shape, no loyalty to one form. It exists as a traveller flowing, freezing, evaporating and returning. If you were to trace the journey of a single molecule, you would find that it has been snow and steam, blood and rain, river and tear. It has been locked in ice for centuries, then set free to wander again. Every drop of water carries memory. It remembers every place it has touched. When the ice melts, it releases not only its contents, but its recollections. Within each droplet are fragments of sunlight and shadow, echoes of forests and oceans that once were. The water that flows now through our rivers has been here before, in other forms, in other ages. It has witnessed extinctions and awakenings, civilizations and silences. It has filled the lungs of creatures long vanished, fallen as rain upon continents that no longer exist. The water in your veins could once have been part of a glacier, or the sea that covered the ancient plains, or the mist that touched the first trees. It is not new. It has simply returned. Scientists often describe water as a solvent, a medium that holds traces of whatever it encounters. Minerals, salts, gases, all dissolve into it. But perhaps it also holds something less tangible, the resonance of time. When we drink from a spring or stand in the rain, we are touching the same substance that once fell on prehistoric ferns, that froze in the veins of mammoths, that shimmered in the clouds above the first fires lit by early humans. Water connects every moment to every other, unbroken and eternal. It is the Earth's bloodstream, carrying the memory of all it has ever been. The memory of water is not written in words but in movement. Watch a stream long enough, and you'll see it think curling around stones, eddying in hesitation, gathering itself before a fall. It is patient and impulsive all at once. Each motion seems to remember where it's been, as if the river knows its own story. Even in glaciers, where movement is almost imperceptible, the same memory exists. Ice flows not by choice but by inheritance, pulled forward by gravity and the faint warmth stored in its depths. The molecules remember the direction of their last journey, and they obey. When the ice melts, the water resumes that path, seeking the ocean as though it has always known the way home. There is a quiet poetry in this endless cycle. Every form of water on Earth is a temporary arrangement, a brief pause in a ceaseless rhythm. Snow is water caught in reflection, rain is water in descent, ocean waves are water breathing. Even clouds, those vast drifting cathedrals in the sky, are made of droplets remembering where they came from. They rise from the sea only to fall again. Each cycle is a story retold with subtle differences, a rhythm that gives shape to time. The memory of water also holds the memory of silence. In the deep ocean, where sunlight never reaches, water rests in eternal stillness. There, pressure replaces movement, and sound is absorbed rather than reflected. Yet even in that stillness, there is history, the slow exchange of minerals, the faint drift of currents shaped by continents that shifted long ago. The deep remembers the weight of glaciers above it, the fall of meteorites, the whispers of volcanic birth. It is a memory written not in words, but in density and depth. Sometimes I think of the rain as a kind of messenger from the past. Each droplet that falls has been many things before it has frozen, evaporated, risen, and fallen countless times. When it lands on your skin, it carries with it the entire lineage of water, In that single fleeting moment, you are touched by oceans, by ice, by clouds that existed before language. The rain does not remember you, but you remember it. That is enough to connect you to everything that ever lived. There are stories from many ancient cultures that speak of water as a living consciousness, as something that listens and responds. In the myths of the Pacific Islands, water is both ancestor and deity, one that carries messages between the living and the unseen. The Egyptians saw the Nile as the planet's heartbeat, pulsing with creation and destruction. In Norse legend, all rivers trace back to the primordial well, the source of wisdom beneath the roots of the world tree. These stories may be metaphors, but they speak a deeper truth, that water is not just a substance but a relationship. It binds everything together, the seen and unseen, the past and the present. If we could listen to water, truly listen, perhaps we would hear the earth remembering itself. The hiss of melting ice, the crash of a wave, the rhythm of rain, they are all expressions of continuity. Even when it seems chaotic, water follows patterns written over millions of years. Ocean currents weave between continents in loops so vast that they take centuries to complete. Rivers carve the same paths over and over, their bends and turns echoing geological memory. In every droplet, the planet speaks to itself. When the glaciers melt, the memory they release doesn't vanish, it flows into us. The same hydrogen and oxygen that drift through clouds and freeze into snow also flow through our blood. We are mostly water, and therefore we are mostly memory. Our bodies are made of ancient seas, of rains that fell before humanity existed. Every heartbeat is a wave breaking against the shore of time. When we cry, our tears are both human and planetary, drawn from a well older than our species. Perhaps that is why the sound of water soothes us. It's not just the rhythm or the texture of the sound, it's recognition. The ocean's pulse mirrors our own. The drip of rain mimics the rhythm of thought. When we sit beside a river, some ancient part of us remembers being part of that flow before flesh, before breath, when life was still dreaming itself into existence. The memory of water lives inside us because we are its continuation. And just as water remembers, so too does it teach. It teaches that everything is transient yet connected. It shows that strength lies in adaptability, that to endure is to change form without losing essence. It teaches patience, the way rivers carve mountains over centuries, the way oceans cradle coral until it grows into stone. It teaches humility. No matter how vast or deep, water always seeks the lowest point, the quietest path. And perhaps most importantly, it teaches forgiveness. No matter what happens to it, pollution, freezing, evaporation, it always returns to purity through motion. It cleanses itself by letting go. The memory of water is the memory of the earth's own spirit. It carries within it the story of creation and destruction, of fire and frost, of beginnings that have no end. When the glaciers are gone, when the last of the ice becomes river and sea, that story will continue. It will fall as rain on new continents, fill the veins of new life, and rise again into clouds that look down on futures we cannot yet imagine. So when you stand beside the ocean or hold a handful of melting snow, remember what you are touching. You are touching time made fluid. You are holding everything that has ever been and everything that will be. The water knows you, even if you do not know it. It recognizes the warmth of your skin as it once recognized sunlight on the sea, or starlight on the surface of an ancient lake. You are part of its memory, and it is part of yours. And long after we are gone, when the world continues to turn and the glaciers rise and fall once more, the water will still be here. It will flow through whatever new forms the earth creates, carrying with it the quiet, the remembrance of every age that has ever passed. The memory of water is endless, because water itself is eternity, never dying, only changing, always returning to begin again. Chapter 18. The Oceans That Remember. When you stand at the edge of the ocean and let the water touch your feet, you are meeting the oldest memory the planet possesses. Every wave that rolls toward the shore is carrying the residue of everything that has ever happened. Dust from mountains, ground to silt, salt from vanished seas, microscopic remnants of creatures that lived and died long before us. The ocean is not just water, it is history made fluid, time made blue. It does not forget, it never can. Long before there was ice, before forests or continents as we know them, there was water. The oceans were the first great mirrors of the world. reflecting a sky without names. They cradled the beginnings of life, fed it, shaped it, and sent it forward into evolution's endless branching. Every heartbeat that has ever existed echoes the rhythm of waves, because life learned to move to their pattern. Even our blood carries the ocean within it, saline, mineral, ancient. To be alive is, in a quiet way, to be part of the sea still dreaming of itself. But the oceans are more than a beginning. They are memory made infinite. Each current, each tide, is a form of remembering, a motion that repeats itself across centuries. The great oceanic gyres that circle the planet take hundreds of years to complete a single loop. A drop of water leaving one coast may not see that coast again for generations, yet it will return, precisely, faithfully. That is the nature of water. It remembers its paths even as it transforms. The ocean's circulation is not random. It is ritual. Beneath its apparent chaos lies an order older than continents. Deep beneath the waves, where sunlight fades into darkness, the water is ancient beyond comprehension. The deep ocean does not move quickly. It drifts, dense and slow, taking thousands of years to complete a single cycle from surface to abyss and back again. The water that rises today in the Pacific may have last seen the surface when humans were still carving their first tools from stone. Down there, time does not flow as we know it. It seeps. The creatures that live in that twilight world are like living fossils, slow-moving, long-lived, as if shaped by time's patience. They dwell in a realm where the present blends seamlessly with the past. When glaciers melt, their waters do not disappear into nothing. They join the sea, adding new layers to its story. The ocean accepts everything run off from rivers, minerals from mountains, even the ashes of civilizations carried by the wind. Nothing is rejected, nothing is wasted. Over time, those gifts dissolve and disperse, becoming part of the whole. That is the quiet genius of the sea. It takes what is broken and makes it infinite. To think of the ocean this way is to realize that it is the planet's consciousness, not sentient perhaps, but deeply aware in its own way. It responds to the moon, to the pull of the sun, to the breath of the wind. It shifts and speaks in tides, in storms, in whispers along the shore. Its memory is dynamic, not static. It is always rewriting itself, always reinterpreting what it knows. When a storm passes, the waves remember its shape for days. When a coastline changes, the sea adjusts its rhythm. It has no need for permanence, because it carries everything in motion. The ancient myths understood this. To the Greeks, the sea was a god restless, emotional, infinite. To the Polynesians, it was an ancestor, a living network connecting all islands and all life. The Celts called it a boundary between worlds. Across every culture, the ocean has always been both the source and the mirror of existence. It holds everything and gives everything back. When people stand before it, they often feel something indescribable, a sense of being seen by something vast and familiar. Perhaps it is because, deep down, we recognize ourselves in it. We are not apart from the sea, we are an expression of it, temporarily walking on land. Beneath the surface, the ocean remembers in ways science is only beginning to understand. The chemical composition of its water carries records of volcanic eruptions, of continental drift, of changing climates across eons. Tiny shells of plankton, sinking slowly through the depths, collect those stories in microscopic layers, one atop another. On the seafloor, those layers harden into sedimentary scrolls, records of every age the planet has passed through. To drill into those sediments is to unroll time itself, to touch the imprints of worlds lost and reborn. Yet the ocean's memory is not always gentle. It remembers catastrophe as well as creation. The scars of ancient tsunamis lie buried in the sands of distant shores. The chemistry of the deep still holds traces of extinction events, when warming or cooling turned its waters toxic and life nearly ended. Even now, it holds our presence too, our plastics, our metals, our waste, all of it absorbed, catalogued and distributed. The ocean does not judge, but it remembers everything we do. And one day, in some form, it will return that memory to us. When you dive beneath the surface, the world becomes quiet in a way that is almost sacred. The deeper you go, the more the noise of human life fades, until all that remains is the slow heartbeat of the water itself. You can feel its age pressing around you, its density like the weight of memory. Down there, light becomes a myth. Shapes dissolve into shadow. It is not frightening, though it is humbling. You are surrounded by something that has existed since the beginning, that will exist long after you are gone, and it accepts you without question. For a moment, you are part of its endless remembering. There is a place in the Southern Ocean where scientists have traced a current that encircles the entire planet, without ever touching land. It is the only one of its kind, a band of water that travels endlessly eastward, linking all the world's seas into a single global pulse. Some call it the Great Conveyor, but I think of it as the heartbeat of the Earth. Every few centuries it completes a revolution, returning to the same point enriched by all the places it has touched. That current is the purest expression of continuity we have, the ocean remembering itself in motion. Sometimes, when I watch the tide withdraw, I imagine the water carrying whispers with it, the small fragments of every word ever spoken near the sea. The laughter of children, the sighs of sailors, the last words of those lost to the waves, all of it absorbed, softened, and kept. The sea has no need to distinguish between joy and sorrow. It keeps both equally, blending them into its song. That is why standing at the ocean's edge can feel both peaceful and overwhelming. You are surrounded by the collective memory of all that has lived and died. As the world warms, the oceans are changing once more. They are expanding, rising, taking back the lands they once claimed. Some call it destruction, others call it balance. Perhaps it is simply the ocean remembering its boundaries, reminding us that it is older and larger than any empire or city. The sea is not cruel, it is constant. It obeys the same cycles it always has, reclaiming what was borrowed. One day, long after we are gone, the ocean will still be here, reshaping the continents, feeding new life, reflecting new skies. The glaciers will return, the ice will grow, and the sea will once again cradle the beginnings of something unknown. The memory will continue, unbroken. Every molecule of water will still carry within it the pulse of all things, the cry of the first life, the breath of the last storm, the sound of rain falling on a forgotten shore. So when you next stand before the sea, listen. The waves that crash at your feet are not just the noise, they are stories being retold, centuries upon centuries of memory woven into motion. They speak of creation, of loss, of return. They are the same waves that once touched the feet of those who came before you, and they will touch the feet of those who follow. The ocean remembers us all. In its vastness, nothing is truly lost, only changed, only carried forward into the next rhythm of the Earth's endless song. Chapter 19. When the World Was Water. There is an ancient memory buried deep within the planet, a time when the Earth was almost entirely blue. Long before mountains rose or continents broke apart, long before forests breathed or creatures crawled, the world was water. Not just oceans as we know them now, but vast, unbroken seas stretching from pole to pole, shimmering beneath a younger, fainter sun. The air was thick and heavy, the sky more silver than blue, and beneath that endless mirror, life was beginning its quiet experiment. It was a world without shorelines, without seasons, without sound. Only motion, only rhythm, only water dreaming of becoming something more. If you could stand at the surface of that primeval earth, though there would be nowhere solid to stand, you would feel the pulse of creation moving beneath you. Hydrothermal vents, glowing like molten wounds in the seafloor, exhaled minerals and heat into the deep. Around them, invisible to the eye, the first stirrings of life gathered, simple cells forming from chemistry and chance, bound together by warmth and patience. The oceans then were a cosmic cradle, a universe within a universe. Everything we know, every tree, every bird, every human thought can trace its ancestry to those first shimmering molecules of life adrift in the dark. The world was not merely covered by water, it was built by it. Scientists call that age the Archean, a time when Earth was still shaping itself, when volcanoes raged beneath the waves and the sky was veiled in methane mist. Yet even then, the faint sea was learning to think. Not with consciousness perhaps, but with connection. Its circulated minerals carried heat and created balance. It became the planet's first circulatory system, its first memory. Every current that moved through those ancient waters carried with it the seeds of what would become time itself, a record of temperature, pressure, chemistry, and change. The oceans even then were storytellers, writing in waves instead of words. In that endless water, life learned its first lessons. It learned to adapt, to transform, to exchange. It learned that motion was survival and stillness was death. The earliest organisms, fragile as foam, invisible to anything that might have seen, began to divide, to feed, to drift toward light. They were the ancestors of everything. And though their world seemed simple, it was already complex beyond measure. Microscopic jungles of chemical exchange, whole galaxies of biology living and dying within droplets. Every breath you take now is a continuation of those first exchanges, every heartbeat a faint echo of those primordial tides. As ages passed, the oceans began to sculpt the earth. They carved the seafloor into ridges and valleys, built mountains of coral and sediment. Beneath the surface, continents began to form, pushed upward by the slow dance of tectonic plates. But even as land appeared, it remained fragile, fleeting. Storms and tides reclaimed it again and again. For millions of years, Earth was a water world with only hints of solidity, a place where islands appeared like thoughts and vanished just as quickly. The horizon was always the same, a curve of light meeting an endless expanse of blue. When life finally emerged from the sea, it did not abandon it. It carried the ocean within. The salt in our blood, the fluid in our cells, the rhythm of our pulse, all mimic the chemistry and cadence of those ancient waters. We are walking vessels of the sea's memory, temporary expressions of its continuity. To be human is, in some profound sense, to be a ripple extending from that first ocean, still connected to it through time and matter. When we cry, our tears carry the same salinity as the oceans that birthed us. When we dream, our minds drift like currents, seeking meaning in fluid motion. We are never truly apart from the sea. We are the sea, dreaming of itself in new forms. It is strange to imagine a world without land, without the familiar division between above and below. In such a world, sound would travel differently, soft and muted, as though wrapped in thought. Light would refract and bend, painting the water with endless gradients of colour. There would be no dawn or dusk as we know them, only a constant shifting of brightness through liquid air. The boundaries between things would blur, as if the universe itself were learning to flow. Time would move more slowly there, measured not by hours or seasons, but by the rhythm of currents and the rise of temperature. A planet without land would not be still. It would breathe in waves. Some scientists believe that Earth came close to returning to that state more than once. During the so-called snowball Earth periods, the planet froze nearly solid, oceans sealed under miles of ice. When the ice began to melt, it flooded the continents, submerging almost everything. For a time, the world was ocean again briefly, beautifully before the land reasserted itself. Perhaps that is why the planet seems to remember water so deeply. It has been both drowned and dry, frozen and boiling, yet the balance always returns to fluid. Water is Earth's memory of freedom, of movement without boundaries. If we listen closely, we can still feel the echo of that water world within us. It speaks through rain, through tides, through the hum of rivers beneath cities. It whispers in the wind that rises from the sea. Each drop of water carries the chemistry of that first ocean, a kind of genetic code for the planet itself. When it falls from clouds, it is not merely rain, it is remembrance. When it freezes into ice, it is meditation, and when it evaporates, rising into mist, it is the planet dreaming of its youth. Perhaps that is why the sound of the sea brings such peace to the human mind. It is not just the rhythm or the repetition, it is recognition. The waves speak a language older than words, a pulse we have known since before there was breath. When we stand at the edge of the water, staring into the horizon, we are looking into our own origin story. The ocean is both mirror and mother, reflecting our fragility and our endurance. It reminds us that everything solid was once fluid, that everything that stands will one day flow again. The world that was once entirely water still exists, in fragments and echoes. It lives in the deep ocean trenches, in the hydrothermal vents that still glow in the dark, in the droplets that fall from the sky. It lives in us, in our veins, in the salt that burns our tongues when we taste tears. The ancient ocean has not gone anywhere, it has merely changed form, like all things on Earth. Every tide, every rainstorm, every snowflake is a small reincarnation of that first endless sea. If the planet ever begins anew, if, in some far future, the continents sink and the ice melts completely, the world will not be ending. It will simply be remembering. The Earth will return to the shape it knew best, the fluid, boundless form that gave birth to everything. The waters will reclaim the mountains, and the deep will breathe again. Life will adapt, as it always has, and perhaps something new will rise from those waves, something that carries within it the same memory, the same longing for form. The cycle will continue, as it has since the beginning, endlessly patient, endlessly blue. When the world was water, there were no borders, no nations, no names. There was only movement and light. In that sense, the sea is not just the origin of life, but the origin of unity. It reminds us that all division is temporary, that beneath the surface of our differences, we are made of the same flow. The ocean's memory is our inheritance, a promise that no matter how far we wander from it, we will always find our way back. Because in the end, everything mountain, glacier, forest, and human is destined to return to water. The world was once all sea, and one day it may be so again. When that time comes, the planet will not weep. It will sing. It will hum with recognition, with the ancient joy of remembering what it has always been. A world that moves, a world that breathes, a world that is forever water. Chapter 20. The Planet That Dreams. Every night, as we drift into sleep, the earth keeps turning beneath us. The tides rise and fall, glaciers creak in the dark, rivers whisper through their channels, and deep below, molten rock flows like slow breath. The planet never truly rests, yet in its motion there is a rhythm that feels almost like dreaming. Perhaps, in its own vast and patient way, the earth dreams. It dreams through movement, through memory, through the endless repetition of creation and decay. Its dreams are not made of thought, but of time, of ice melting into rivers, of stars reflected in black water, of continents remembering the oceans they once were. To imagine that the earth dreams is not to romanticize it, but to understand it differently. Every living thing on this planet, from the smallest plankton to the tallest tree, is part of a single breathing organism that has been evolving for over 4 billion years. It shifts, it changes, it forgets and remembers. Its ice ages or its long sleeps, its thaws or its awakenings. Its eruptions, its storms, its blooms of life are its moments of imagination, fleeting flashes of energy that create something new from what was old. If the planet could think, it might see us not as separate beings, but as fragments of its own consciousness, brief dreams within a greater dream. When we sleep, our brains reorganize memory. They take the fragments of the day and weave them into stories, symbols, and visions. The Earth does something similar. It takes the remnants of each era, fossils, sediments, relics, and folds them into layers of rock and ice. These layers are not static. They move, compress, dissolve, and reform. Over time, the planet rewrites its own past, blending the details of one age into another, the way a dream merges people and places without logic or order. In that sense, geology is the Earth's form of memory consolidation, its way of making sense of itself. Sometimes, when we look closely at the patterns in the land, it feels as though we are peering into one of those dreams. The ridges and valleys of mountain ranges look like wrinkles on a sleeping face. The swirling patterns of ocean currents resemble the slow waves of a dreaming brain. Even the drifting of continents follows a strange rhythm, like the pulse of something unconscious but alive. The planet's dream is not tranquil. It is filled with both wonder and violence, but it always moves toward balance, the way a sleeper shifts until they find rest. And perhaps we are part of that process. Humanity, with all its noise and brilliance and error, could be seen as one of the planet's more vivid dreams, a momentary flare of awareness within a vast and ancient mind. We invent, we destroy, we build symbols and stories to explain ourselves, much as a dream builds meaning from fragments of thought. We imagine worlds within worlds, forgetting that we are already inside one. When we look up at the stars, we are the Earth dreaming of the sky. When we build cities, we are the Earth dreaming of itself made conscious. There is a quiet poetry in this perspective. If the Earth dreams, then nothing on it is truly lost. Every extinction, every collapse, every forgotten civilization is absorbed into the ongoing reverie. The ice that buries a forest does not erase it. It transforms it into a new image, a new idea within the larger whole. the forest becomes coal, the coal becomes energy, the energy becomes movement, and that movement becomes wind, water, thought. The dream continues in different forms. Death, in this view, is not an ending but a change in narrative, a shift in the story the planet tells itself. When the glaciers move, when volcanoes rise, when deserts bloom for the first time in centuries, those are the Earth's lucid moments, its bursts of creativity. And when the world falls quiet, when ice spreads across the poles and the air grows still, those are its moments of deep rest. Even now, as the ice melts and the seas rise, the planet is dreaming of something beyond us, something it has not yet imagined. To us, this change feels perilous, but to the Earth, it is only transformation. Dreams, after all, are never static. They are fluid, shifting, unpredictable. In the dark of the ocean's deepest trenches, where pressure crushes nearly everything, strange creatures glow softly, their light pulsing like the flicker of neurons. The patterns of their movement, seen from afar, resemble thought. It's easy to imagine that somewhere in that abyss, the planet's consciousness stirs, that the shimmer of those creatures is the electrical fire of its dreaming mind. The deep sea, the core, the mantle, all of them are part of a hidden anatomy. The rivers are its veins, the mountains its bones, the atmosphere its breath. And we, the humans, are a fleeting signal passing through that body, a spark of awareness it will one day fold back into itself. Dreams are not only for the dreamer, they are also for what comes after. When the Earth dreams of forests, seeds awaken. When it dreams of warmth, glaciers retreat. When it dreams of silence, species fall asleep beneath ice. The cycles of this planet are not accidents. They are its imagination at work, shaping and reshaping what it means to be alive. Every blade of grass, every cloud, every grain of sand is part of the same sentence written in countless variations. The dream keeps rewriting itself, erasing and rewriting, never satisfied, never complete. There is something deeply peaceful about that idea, because if the Earth dreams, then everything has a place in its story, every river, every fossil, every atom of air. Even we, with our fleeting civilizations and fragile ambitions, are part of its continuity. Our roads and machines and languages may one day crumble into dust, but that dust will feed new soil, and that soil will feed new life. In the end, the Earth will remember us not for what we built, but for what we became, a brief and luminous part of its imagination. Perhaps that is what we are doing when we dream of other worlds, of oceans on distant planets, of civilizations beyond our stars. Perhaps it is not just our curiosity, but the planet's own dream reaching outward through us, imagining what else it could become. Through us, the Earth dreams of space, of time, of infinity. Through us, it dreams of itself looking back from the dark. And so, when the ice melts, when the mountains crumble, when all that is solid becomes fluid again, it is not the end of the dream. It is simply a turning of the page. The planet will shift, reshape, and begin another story. Somewhere in that next age, the rivers will carve new paths, the air will fill with new voices, and life will begin again, carrying within it the memory of all that came before. We may not be awake to it now, but one day, perhaps, the Earth will open its eyes, not as a planet of stone and water, but as a being of pure memory, a consciousness made of oceans and wind. It will remember every glacier, every creature, every moment of warmth and frost, and it will breathe in silence. The dream will not end. It will expand, flowing outward into the universe, as the Earth, this dreaming world, finally realizes it was alive all along. And maybe that is all existence ever was. A dream without a dreamer, flowing endlessly through time, changing shape but never essence. The glaciers, the seas, the forests, the stars, they are all thoughts in the same vast mind, flickering in and out of awareness. When we close our eyes at night and drift into dreams of our own, we are not leaving the world. We are returning to it, becoming part of its endless, beautiful, unbroken dream.